Members, it's gone 10 o'clock. Good morning, members, officers and members of the public. I would remind members that this meeting is recorded, will then be placed on the Council's website where it will be capable for repeated viewing. The recording has now begun. Lynn, in the first instance, can we have the sediment and apologies?
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, members. Provost Barry Douglas.
Here.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
Yes, Lynn, I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Gordon Jenkins.
Here, thank you.
Councillor John McFadden. Councillor John McGee.
Yeah.
Councillor Helen Coffey.
Yeah.
Councillor Ian Grant.
Present.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Tom Cook.
Here.
Councillor Lillian Jones.
Good morning, all.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Here.
Councillor Douglas Reid.
Here.
Councillor Fiona Campbell.
Here, thanks.
Councillor John Campbell. Thanks, Councillor Campbell. Councillor John Heard.
Here.
Councillor John Knapp.
Present.
Councillor Claire Maitland. Councillor Jim Todd.
Here.
Deputy Provost Sally Cogley.
Here.
Councillor George Mayer.
Here.
We have an apology this morning from Councillor Elena Whittam. Councillor Claire Leach. Here, Lynn. Councillor Neil McGee. Councillor Jim Roberts.
Here, Lynn.
Councillor Alison Simmons.
Here.
We have an apology also this morning from Councillor Billy Crawford. Councillor Jim McMahon.
Here, Lynn, thanks.
Councillor Jackie Todd.
Here, thanks, Lynn.
Councillor Walter Young.
Here.
Councillor John Bell.
Here.
Councillor Elaine Dinwoody.
Present.
And Councillor Drew Filson.
Here.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Lynn. Members, it's good to see you all and so many of you in the chamber here today. Feels a bit more like a normal situation. Whilst it's not normal out there in our community, it still is good to see a good few faces in here today. And I know Jackie Todd has been unwell. I hope you're feeling better. I also believe Councillor Walter Young has had a bit of an injury as well. So I hope you're on the mend, Walter. Members, just to say, first of all, that I was lucky enough to visit Teekabow on the 4th of March with Katie Kelly, our Deputy Chief Exec, to visit the Joint Chief Executives Martin Hay and Natalie Snedden and the Chair, John McManus, where they showed us some of their ambitious plans for the future for what was New Farm Law Community Centre. What they've achieved, I think, over the last 10 years since the group formed, I think is truly amazing. It's a really fantastic community facility with much more to come. And I think I'm sure I speak for all members in wishing them the very best of luck for the future. With the Teekabow theme continuing, on the 5th of March, it was a pleasure to attend the production of Shrek the Musical at the Palace Theatre on Saturday, 5th of March. That's a 2-year absence that the group have had from playing the stage at the Palace. And I have to say the hard work and dedication from all the cast and crew definitely paid off. It was the most enjoyable and the cast were absolutely amazing. So well done to them all. I think without a doubt, we all know in this chamber, and I'm sure beyond, that we really have a great array of talent here in East Ayrshire and we should be proud of it. It was also good to attend the Kinship Carers Coffee Morning at Celebrate Kilmarnock on the 12th of March and had the chance to discuss the issues faced by our local kinship carers and kinship kids. Councillor Claire Maitland was certainly there and Willie Coffey MSP. It was good to have that turnout, I think, from elected members because it is a really important issue. So thanks again to Nancy, who organises these events, Nancy Kershaw, Gillian Richmond and Anna Payton, who are the sort of stalwarts of the group, and to everybody else involved in organising the event, because the needs of kinship carers and kinship kids are absolutely must be top priority for us all going forward. Members, with those short remarks, I'll continue with the agenda proper. I'll be back later to make a few comments about our departing members. Jim Roberts is already laughing because he knows I've got special comments for Jim. So first of all, members, can I ask for any declarations of interest? Before we do, oh no, we won't actually, we will, no we will, we'll do declarations of interest. First of all, I would declare that I do work for a house builder, but they don't have any particular representations made to this local development plan, so I'm content that I can take part in the meeting. I'm also a chartered town planner and a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. So members, hopefully that will make it clear. Any other members' interests? Councillor Roberts.
Thanks very much, Provost. I would like to declare a significant interest in regard to item 6, which is LDP 2. Members will know my long-standing opposition to incineration. BAR's application in the past for a gasification plant, I formally objected to that, and I have a formal objection in as well in regard to the full incineration process that is currently with planning. Provost, if you would allow me possibly at the start of item 6, maybe just to say a few words of thanks to the officers and members who participated in the member officer working group, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Jim, thank you. Any other members? Jim McMahon?
It's similar to Councillor Roberts. I have a formal objection, and it's the LDB2 plan, and it's the same objection to the incineration plant.
Thank you. Councillor Leach?
Likewise, Provost, I also have a formal objection into the incinerator.
Thank you. Any other members here in the chamber or online? I'm almost forgetting about those online. I've got somebody. Councillor Jackie Todd.
Yep, same as has already been declared. Chair, I've also lodged an objection regarding the incinerator. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from members to allow us to continue? Oh, Councillor Roberts, want to back in?
Sorry, Provost, I should have said several years ago I made representation at the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Parliament Petitions Committee. So that is a stage further than some of my other colleagues. So it does constitute a significant conflict.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, we will move on to the previous minutes and those submit them for a record of approval for the council meeting of the 24th of February 2022. I would move those. Deputy Provost, you seconding them?
Thank you. Yes, I'll second those.
Thank you. Just matters arising from that last council. I think Chief Executive would like to say a few words, if that's okay, members.
Thanks, Provost. Good morning, members. Just a few words in relation to Ukraine that we spoke about, at the last council. As you would anticipate, the council have been, forward-thinking in terms of this. We've got an overall strategic group led by the CMT. We have officers, Blair Miller and Wendy Johnston, who are dealing with the practicalities of that. As a council, we have put forward a number of tenancies in conjunction with our social landlords that may be suitable. There's also been routes clearly through families in East Ayrshire, and there's been routes through other people offering homes either through the Scottish Government route or the private route. At this stage, where we are with that, and we were given a data sharing agreement from the Scottish Government that colleagues in legal turned around within 24 hours for us to be able to go out and do the relevant checks, etc. with people, and we're still about waiting on the guidance, for that. We stand ready to provide that support in terms of the practicalities, when we get that list and go out, and we would anticipate briefing members as this, grows over the next number of weeks.
Thank you, Eddie. If only our Home Office were as efficient as this council. Any other points in terms of the previous minutes? No, we've now approved them. So, okay, we'll move on to item 3, which is the Cabinet and Committee minutes. I intend to move them on block, members, if that is agreeable. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those minutes, please? Councillor Reid.
Move, Provost.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Cook, thank you very much. Okay, members, we'll move on to item 4, and an item I used to dread, I have to say. Activities of the Governance and Scrutiny Committee Annual Report for 2021, which is pages 88 to 98 of your papers. Councillor Mayor, it's your finale. Over to you.
Thanks, Provost. It's taken me 10 years to get to speak at Council, so I'm doing okay. Just to introduce the report, it's on page 88, as you all know. I was appointed chair of the Governance and Scrutiny Committee following the meeting of Council on 24th of June, succeeding Provost Douglas, who had held that position since the Council statutory meeting in May. And obviously I'd like to thank Barry. He's a hard act to follow for the contributions that he did while he was chair of Governance and Scrutiny. Also following on from the June meeting, there were some other changes in the membership of the committee. Councillors Leach and Jackie Todd moved on, and Councillors Gordon Jenkins, Maureen Mackay and Jim Todd joined the committee. And I'd like to thank them for their input over the last 9 months or so that I've been chair. Obviously, during 2021, COVID-19 had a very significant impact in all the work that the council did and how the services were delivered to the council. And I'd like to put in record my appreciation of the hard work that was done by all the members and the officials when we were dealing with the COVID situation. The areas of activity cover, as you know, the scrutiny, the performance-based value, audit and risk, corporate governance and standard of conduct. So a fair amount of work for the G&S committee, which those of you that are not members, and certainly me that I was a member, didn't appreciate the amount of work that goes through that particular committee. They deal with call-ins, but there were no call-ins during 2021. And I think that reflects well on the arrangements that we've got in place for the constructive cross-party political engagement and cooperation. So most of the problems are ironed out before we get to the length of calling in decisions of the Cabinet. The Council on the 24th of June agreed the high-level strategic priorities for 21 to 24. That's the Ayrshire Growth Deal and the Caring for Ayrshire Transformation Change Programme. And in February, the Council approved a report on the development of the new strategic plan, with members also agreeing that the new strategic plan will be presented to the new Council in June 2022. As far as the scrutiny topics, there were again none in 2021. I think because of the COVID situation, you know, that we didn't have any topics introduced, if you like. Internal audit, the Local Authority Scotland accounts and the various regulations require internal audit's annual programme of work to be approved by the committee, and that was done, and we've had a couple of reports since on the progress of the report. Pleased to say that the internal audit annual report continued to state an opinion on the basis of internal work carried out that East Ayrshire Council's established internal control procedures were generally found to operate as intended. So the internal audit's quite happy with what we do. They are also subject to annual review by the Council's external auditors, which were Deloitte, and the reports from Deloitte showed a number of positive references to the Council's governance arrangements, so they're quite happy with the situation here as well. I should say also that our Chief Auditor continues as a member of the Scottish Local Authorities Chief Internal Auditors Group Management Committee and does a sterling job representing East Ayrshire at these further committees, if you like. We have the anti-fraud strategy, and we have a joint corporate fraud team with North Ayrshire, and that's doing well as well in recovering money on behalf of the council and preventing further fraud, if you like. As I said, the external auditors, Deloitte, they considered the required matters and were happy that we have a strong financial management arrangements in place, and that the outcome of the audit was that the council will receive an unmodified audit opinion on the annual accounts. So again, good news by our finance team, which I'm sure we all would expect anyway. The performance and best value, the regular East Ayrshire performance reports provided members with the opportunity to monitor and review performance throughout the year. And in April 2022, the committee will receive a progress report noting the completion of the 2021 standard performance indicators, which go to the government. In April 2022, also progress against the Improvement Action Plan arising from the new findings of the Best Value Assurance Review report published by the Accounts Commission will be reported to the committee. And the complaints annual report for 2021 shows that the number of complaints received by the council was 115 compared to 121 in the previous year. So the total numbers going down, and the number of complaints received by the SPSO fell to 11 compared to 17. And we have a new complaints handling procedure in place, and it was confirmed that the council had duly implemented the new procedure by the required date. As far as corporate governance is concerned, the Governance and Scrutiny Committee received a progress report in April 2021 detailing how the council was performing against the Corporate Governance Improvement Action Plan. In education, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, no inspections took place throughout the year until mid-December 2021. But it should be said at the last meeting we received a report on 5 early education premises that had all been inspected, and they had all done very well. So they're now back on stream with their reports. We also received a report on the secondary school leaver attainment report. And this report highlighted the outstanding initial school leaver destination figure of 94.72%. So about 95% of the kids leaving school go to a positive destination, which is a tremendous figure. As far as scrutiny and oversight, generally, during the year, the committee continued to consider a range of other periodic reports, dangerous and derelict buildings, the Scottish Social Housing Charter, final measurements and contracts, all the stuff that goes on in the background. But the G&S committee received reports on the progress. On Treasury Management, a mid-year update report for financial year 2021 was considered in February, and the annual Treasury Management report was presented to committee on September 30th. The committee also considered during the year the Council's Climate Change Public Sector Report and the Choose Life Suicide Action Plan. As far as the standards of conduct are concerned, an important aspect of the work of the committee continues to be in relation to standard of conduct by elected members. And it's pleasing to note that yet again there were no complaints against members of East Ayrshire Council, consistent with previous years, which have seen very few complaints made against any of our councillors. I noted with some concern that one councillor elsewhere had been reported for referring to one of his colleagues as short, fat and ugly in the chambers. I'm pleased to say that we have never descended to that level here in East Ayrshire, and long may it continue, although I did recognise the description. The Governance and Scrutiny Committee annual self-assessment, well, the first one was done and undertaken by members of the committee in May 2021, and the second one is scheduled in the committee's work plan to take place on April 2022. So they're keeping us all working right up to the very end. So we're having that in April 2022. Many of the reports and much of the information provided to the committee during the year have highlighted the huge impact of COVID-19 on our residents and local communities. The fantastic efforts made by the council and partner employees and elected members as well to support the people of East Ayrshire throughout the pandemic are noted. And finally, I would just like to thank all the officials, particularly Stuart Nelson, who's been a great help to me over the last 9 months or so, and David Mitchell, who is, as usual, does a great job in getting the work, getting us through the work of the G&S committee. So, members, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. And good to know you managed to get Nancy's nickname for you into your speech as well. No, I jest. Members in the chamber, first of all, have you any questions? Because this is your last chance to grill him. He's leaving us. So, and online, any members get any questions or comments? George, you're getting off lightly, but I'd just like to thank you for your contribution, and certainly a far better speech than your predecessor gave. Members, that items for noting, have we agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Members, will now take us on to item 5, which is East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership 21-22 Annual Review of Strategic Plan, Workforce Development and Support Plan, Communication Strategy and Property and Asset Management Strategy. And Craig MacArthur will take us through that paper. Thanks.
Thanks, Provost, and probably the longest ever title of a paper that's come to Council, so apologies for that. This is just to present the outcomes from the 21-22 Annual Review of the Strategic Plan, Workforce Development Support Plan, Communication Strategy, Property and Asset Management Strategy for endorsement. These have already been approved by the IJB, come to Council today for endorsement, and are also scheduled to go to the NHS Board in May for their endorsement as well. So the Strategic Planning and Wellbeing Delivery Group has undertaken the annual review of the Strategic Plan and concluded that the plan remains fit for purpose, reflects the partnership's strategic intent, and the group also reaffirmed the vision, values and strategic commissioning intentions as set out within the plan and identified key priorities for 2022 and beyond. The report also sets out the findings from the annual review of the interim Workforce Development Support Plan, the COM strategy and the Property and Asset Management Strategy. Table 6 within the report just highlights again the core themes, local outcomes, etc. that are contained within the strategic plan. These then become the strategic commissioning intentions that we then seek to deliver against. Paragraph 11 talks about the key enablers that underpin the delivery of the strategic plan, round about workforce, information communication, property and assets, thinking differently, the housing contribution, and underpinning all of that again, leadership and improvement. In terms of the annual review of the strategic plan, paragraphs 15 onwards, just talks about the process it went through. So the Strategic Planning and Wellbeing Delivery Group on the 22nd of February undertook that annual review of the strategic plan, reaffirmed the values contained within that, with also an opportunity to include keeping safe within that vision. So the refreshed vision statement set out there as being working together with all of our communities to improve and sustain wellbeing, care and safety and promote equity. We also considered the reality of what people, compassion and partnership has actually meant during 21-22, and again that was reaffirmed as a foundation for our strategic planning approach going forward. One such reflection on the day was that more than ever, people, compassion and partnership has been our focus and how we have supported one another. I think that's just a recognition of where we've been over the last number of years in terms of the pandemic and the response to that. So in terms of that review, the 6 strategic commission intentions that I mentioned previously are noted in paragraph 6 of the report, were seen to continue to be appropriate and remain stable, and that's what we'll continue to work through in the coming year. Partners also reflected in our strong, positive, collaborative leadership, their resilience and capacity to face change, both within the organisation but also across our communities, and also the positive, empowered way in which our communities and citizens have undertaken and responded to the unprecedented challenge that were faced over the last year. A number of supporting plans in relation to participation and engagement continue to be seen as big enablers of that strategic activity, to make sure that people involved in service delivery, whether actually providing or receiving services, continue to be involved, and we make sure that that participation is very real in terms of developing and delivering services. Strategic Plan 2021-30 was therefore assessed as fit for purpose and effective, taking into account the changing policy and delivery environment detailed above. No replacement plan is therefore required. Moving on to those other plans that we mentioned at the start, the Workforce Development Support Plan. We currently have an interim plan in place for a 1-year period, whilst we await further guidance from Scottish Government around about a 3-year plan. That guidance is now imminent. A number of areas within the workforce plan have been progressed during 21-22, as detailed in the bullet points at paragraph 26 of the report. And as I mentioned, we're awaiting the updated workforce planning guidance from the Scottish Government, and that will probably require us to submit completed workforce plans to the Scottish Government by the end of July this year. And the intention would be that we'll continue to work through the draft plan that we've got, formalise it over the coming months, and bring a final draft workforce development support plan to the IJB at the 22nd of June meeting. Feedback from that IJB meeting can then be incorporated into the final submission that we made to the Government. In terms of communication strategy, The 21-24 strategy was published last year. It clearly aligns with the 3-year life cycle of the overall strategic plan. And again, work has been progressed in the last year in a number of key areas, as detailed at paragraph 38. We now have our campaign and events calendar established that we can work our way through. Partnerships newsletter has been updated and rebranded. A number of good news stories that we share within that newsletter are also now shared publicly through the NHS board briefing meetings. New Living Well website was launched earlier this year, which seems to have landed really well, and we're making increased use of social media platforms just to get some of those important messages out to our communities. During the last year, and as planned in the strategy, a partnership engagement officer has now been appointed and is in post. That'll be a 2-year fixed term appointment, just to drive forward some of that strategic approach to participation and engagement within the organisation, but more importantly across all our partners and citizens as well. Some really exciting opportunities starting to emerge around about that as we go forward. In terms of the property and asset management plan, again, a 3-year plan that aligns to the strategic plan 21 to 24, focused on 5 localities, being Northern, Kilmarnock, Irvine Valley, Cumnock and the Doon Valley. And a brief summary at paragraph 42 of the report for each of those areas is included in terms of some of the key achievements and highlights. And again, it won't come as a surprise to members because we've spoken about it often enough. One of those highlights is around about the Doon campus and the progress that we're now starting to see made around about what we can deliver in there and how that can align to caring for Ayrshire. Similar progress being made with East Ayrshire Community Hospital and the real opportunity to start to change the models of delivery up there as well. Promised I'm aware that there's a number of valedictory speeches being delivered later in today's meeting, but just as part of this report, can I take the opportunity to thank all the council elected members that have participated in the various IJB meetings and fora over the last 5 years. I think we've probably seen the various reports we've brought here. We've made tremendous progress over that period of time. That is very much about working in true partnership, and I just wanted to recognise that and put that on the record in terms of a thank you. The recommendations are noted in paragraph 55 of the report, and essentially it's to endorse the findings of the review as already been agreed by the IJB, but happy to take any questions, Provost.
Thank you, Craig. Members, have you any comments or questions? Councillor John McGee.
Hi, it's mere a comment than a question, Provost. Just to say that obviously this has previously been approved by the IJB, but just to highlight paragraph 42, some of the key achievements. And the first one is in the Northern Area workshops held in November 2021 regarding appointing a third party to scope the community requirements within Stewarton, and a meeting was held with HSCP managers in December 2021 to discuss accommodation issues within the Stewarton Health Centre. And I'm quite sure that might be something that's touched upon in the next item in the agenda, but just to point out, Ken, that there's work going on in the background all the time to listen to our communities and make sure we're paying attention to what they're telling us. Thank you.
Thank you. Members online, I've got Councillor Mackay first of all, and then I don't know who the other one is, but I'll find it, and then Ian Linton. So Councillor Mackay, then Ian Linton. Maureen, are you there?
Sorry, Provost, I am. I'm doing my usual between 2 internet devices. Sorry, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, we'll come back to Councillor Mackay in a bit. Councillor Linton.
Thanks, Provost. It was just really to echo Councillor John McGee's sentiments. Having been on the IJB since the shadow year, right through until now, I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude to Craig and his team, and obviously Eddie in his former role as head of the IJB. I think we should be rightly proud of our achievements. I think we're probably, in fact, not even probably, we are the best IJB in Scotland, and I think that's down to the hard work of all those concerned. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ian. Any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Reid, Councillor Todd, and then we'll see if we can get Councillor Mackay.
Thanks. Just in terms of the report, it's just particularly to thank, as Ian and I've just mentioned there, the work of Eddie, and Craig has stepped into Eddie's shoes quite comfortably and certainly delivering an excellent service for us all. And I think we've got an exciting future there too. As John highlighted there in paragraphs 42, with the Doon campus and the Kilmarnock Wellbeing Centre, real engagement with our communities, and what's been described as a wellbeing pandemic that's kind of facing us post-COVID. We're in a good place to address some of these issues and tackle some of the serious issues of suicide prevention and alcohol and drugs addiction, just the scourge of our communities, and we have a focus. So there's big challenges there ahead, not least financially as well, but I think we're in a good place to meet these challenges head on, but we've got a fight in our hands.
Thank you very much. Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Provost. I said it before, Craig, it's the way that you and your team work with individuals, talk about individuals here. When the situation arises, unfortunately, where maybe somebody's fell through the wee safety net, the way that your team work with a caring and with empathy, an attitude of caring for that individual, that's certainly my experience when I've approached you for individual constituents. And it's the way that goes on, and that's what puts our council at the forefront of being a caring council. And it's evidenced in the way that individuals are treated with respect. So well done. Please pass on to all the team. Well done for all that good work over the years.
Thank you for that, Councillor Todd. I would echo those sentiments. Anything else, members? I think what we'll do then, if we're not getting Councillor Mackay back in, I think we should. Oh, she is indeed here. Over to the Kilmarnock North correspondent.
It feels a bit like that, Provost. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I certainly would echo the comments that have been made. It has always been a pleasure to know that we do genuinely have the very best IJB in Scotland. Paragraph 42 is certainly very exciting when I'm reading that, and I know that members of the community reading that will be very excited as well. Because I know we are the very best, I am going to push Craig and I'm going to say, so Craig, that's fantastic, give me time scales.
Craig, over to you. $1 million question.
So there's a lot in there in terms of timescales. There's lots of individual projects and programmes of work in there. A lot of this is aligned to Caring for Ayrshire, which then becomes a kind of 8 to 10 year transformational programme, and that doesn't mean all of this will be delivered after 10 years. I think what we're really keen to do, and I'm not avoiding the answer here in terms of putting an absolute timescale on it, but I think what we're keen to do is that we push ahead, we see the opportunities and we take them when we can. We don't necessarily see that aligning well to Caring for Ayrshire sometimes, and we're kind of pushing a wee bit quicker than the others might like us to do. But that's good, and I think that's what we'll continue to do, just in terms of that sort of really ambitious timescales that we do want to set ourselves. So I think as we start to see some of these opportunities being fleshed out a wee bit, and we are working on all of them just now, then we will put pretty ambitious timescales round about them. So the Doon one, for example, we know that's starting to really develop ahead of steam, so it will probably deliver very, very quickly. East Ayrshire Community Hospital has already those models of care are now in development. It's been delayed slightly, but for good reasons, because the hospice is currently now located within the community hospital. So we've deliberately just paused what we're doing there to allow that to take place in a really good, well-structured way. The technology-enabled Pathfinder project within the Irvine Valley, again, is making excellent progress, and some of the learning from there will now start to see rolled out into other areas as well, so that will move very, very quickly. Probably the Kilmarnock one's the one that might take a bit longer, just in terms of how we start to really see that align to the broader recommendations, proposals and ambition for Kilmarnock Town Centre as a whole, and how the wellbeing aspect of that can really align to it. But again, I think the ambition that we have round about that, we'll want to see that delivered probably as quickly as we possibly can do. So not avoiding the question, Councillor Mackay, in terms of putting definitive timescales against it, but I think what you'd expect us to do is just to deliver that as quickly as we possibly can do over the next few years.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Mackay, are you satisfied? The Director of Health and Social Care is going to push as fast as we can, and certainly bring our colleagues, probably in the NHS and others, with us, rather, so leading the way, which is exactly how this council should be. Councillor Mackay, are you satisfied with that?
Provost, I know the determination and the drive that exists within this council. I trust the Director of Health and Social Care I trust our Chief Executive, and I know that with our backing and a future council's backing, they will be able to drive forward and achieve their goals and the ambitions of the people in East Ayrshire.
A ringing endorsement. Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Provost. Just a wee bit of clarification from Craig on the Dune campus. He mentioned the Dune campus there. Architects have been stood down because there are a couple of issues just now. One is Scottish Government education delivery funding, and I think it's the other one's NHS is looking for a bigger footprint in the new school. Just wondering if that NHS side of things have been sorted out.
Through you, Provost, yes. So I think what we have done is we've looked at the opportunities that the new development brings. So this isn't about replacing like with like. This is about being very future focused and starting to really change that model of delivery. So you're right, that does mean a bigger footprint than what we have currently, but it will mean a very different range of services also being delivered there. So the conversations we've had through NHS, CMT and indeed the board have the full backing of the NHS locally around about. They see that as a real opportunity around about caring for Ayrshire. And on the back of that, myself and a couple of other directors from the NHS board have met with colleagues from Scottish Government Capital team, and they have confirmed that they are absolutely supportive of this as well. So in terms of that initial conversation that we had to have, that's now taking place, and we do have a formal commitment from NHS round about the funding of a bigger footprint. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Councillor Filson. Any other questions or comments from members, or can we move to the recommendations? Members, the recommendations are at paragraph 55 and page 110. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Craig. Okay, we will now move over to the big item in the agenda, which is Local Development Plan 2, Proposed Plan Action Programme, Environmental Report, Kilmarnock Town Centre and South Central Kilmarnock Development Framework, Supplementary Guidance and Summary Responses to the Main Issues Report. Craig, that was definitely a longer title than your report, but I'll hand over to David McDowell and the team. Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Roberts, you're going to leave us.
Thanks very much for indulging me, Provost. Just allow me to say a few words before I remove from the chamber. I think this has been a long and arduous process to get to this particular juncture. I just would like to mention a couple of your staff, Eddie, David McDowell, Carol, Karen, Claire, Alison and Stuart Nelson, and of course Lynn at the end of the table. I think we have to recognise the professionalism of your officers. Bearing in mind the length of time this process has been on the go. I'd also like to pay tribute to my fellow elected members. We might not have been the sharpest pencils in the box in terms of some of the discussions, but nonetheless, Eddie, your officers kept us on the straight and narrow in regard to some of the questions that we asked. I think when you look at the documentation in front of you, members, you'll see how diverse the topics are that we have actually looked at. The consultation, which was so important, I don't think we could have done much more in terms of consultation. We tried to consult with everybody, try and take everybody's opinion on board. We looked at things like Bellfield Interchange, development sites, Ayrshire Growth Deal, collaboration with other agencies, which is so important. The importance of peatlands, bearing in mind what happened during the coal issues, and of course the topic of flooding. I think in regard to the recommendations, there is a salient point there held in recommendation 3, bearing in mind the tight time constraints we're working under. But Eddie and Provost, thanks for indulging me on this, and a big thank you to everybody who was involved. So with that, I'll remove myself from the chamber, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roberts. And Councillor Roberts has been, I think, an excellent chair of the Planning Committee and is well briefed on planning issues. So thank you for your contributions in that regard. I'll get you back later, though, in my final speech. Members, I'll hand you over then to David McDowell and his team, who I think are up the stairs.
Yes, thank you, Provost. We're remotely in one of the offices here, so we're going to do this presentation and then obviously take questions from members. So I'd just like to introduce Karol Dorkichenko. Karol's last meeting here with us today. He formally retires tomorrow, so it's with Karol's support and leadership that we're here today, and Karen Purvis as well, who Councillor Roberts has just mentioned. We've been We've been heavily involved in bringing the paper that you have before you today. There is quite a history to this to understand why it is being considered just at the end of the calendar year. But the paper itself looks to consider and approve the LDP2 and the supplementary papers that you mentioned, Provost. So we're looking to, if we can get authorisation to advertise and invite representations in the LDP2, then bring back a kind of feedback report to members, obviously after probably about June time or thereafter. So we have the history here is that members will recall that the main issues report was considered in June 2020. That identified a number of areas in each community, everything from infrastructure right through to to where housing land was required. And has been mentioned by some of the members about how we have to look at bringing in areas such as the Ayrshire Growth Deal into the plan. So the Members Officers Working Group, we've had about 30 of those, and we've also had work briefings in addition. And I'd like to thank members for all their input, because we wouldn't be here today without their involvement. We have listened. I mean, that was one of the kind of key matters that we wanted to ensure that we heard what the kind of key issues from the members and the community were. We've introduced that within the proposals that you have before you today. So that journey is here today because we have been delayed. The delay has been through the National Planning Framework 4. Members will recall that Cabinet seen this report been presented, and understanding that the delay has around about between a year and 18 months has meant that we've had to put back our submission of the LDP2. That delay has meant that we've also included all the NPF4 requirements within today's report, and that has been fed through the Members Officer Working Group. Members will also be aware that the current local development plan expires in April, i.e. As of tomorrow, or next week rather. And that means that we need to look at what these risks are and bring those risks to show how we can mitigate those. And the proposals today sets that out. So the consultation process will be looking to be completed by June, and then we will, as members heard yesterday at Cabinet, in terms of the development plan scheme, the proposals for the rollout of LDP2 over the rest of the year. So, members, I just kind of highlight before I pass you over to Carol that there is risk associated with the decision today. So the LDP2, if it's not approved, will then miss the Scottish Government backstop, and given that we're working under current legislation, we would miss that opportunity and then having to go back and revisit all the local development plan from the start under the new legislation. So by approving today means that the local development plan can be considered as a material consideration in all planning applications moving forward, and that will allow us to deal with things in a in a manner that is required. So I'm going to pass you over to Carol, just take you through the highlights of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This is a very important step in the planning process for East Ayrshire. What we're asking the Council to do is to approve the proposed local development plan 2 for East Ayrshire itself and all of the background papers. And you will know from the various appendices, these are very substantial indeed. We are also asking for approval to start and commence the consultation exercise. As David said, there are deadlines in relation to transition to the new 2019 Planning Act. And so we're asking for confirmation from yourselves that we're able to start that process. As David, I want to thank all members for their involvement in the preparation of the local development plan as proposed. It's been a huge effort on everyone's part. Members have, particularly the Members Officers Working Group, engaged very productively with officers and others in producing the various documents in the plan itself. And I want to thank all members who have taken part, either individually at the Members' Officers Working Group or through the ward sessions. Everyone has had an involvement in preparing this plan itself. And in particular too, I want to thank the colleagues across the board, all services for their input, but also to the team in development planning and regeneration. I've never prepared a local development plan during a pandemic. As David said, the main issues report was approved in June 2020. That was after the lockdown, and so this plan has been produced under very challenging and exceptional circumstances, and it's testament to the work and effort and dedication of staff, particularly within the development planning that we are at the present time. Why are we producing a new local development plan for East Ayrshire? Three key reasons. First one, the current plan will be in April out of date. So we need to replace it, simple as that. Secondly, we have developed very strong mechanisms to work with communities in relation to placemaking. Under the new Planning Act, we will not be able to do that in the same way. So we want to continue with those arrangements, utilising supplementary guidance, which we can do under the transition arrangements at present time. And thirdly, we want to support the Ayrshire Growth Deal. It's a very ambitious programme of projects, and we want, obviously, because the plan's going out of date, we want a new plan to support implementation of the Ayrshire Growth Deal. What I'm going to do now is just very briefly go through the next steps in relation to the process, and then I'll go into the content of the plan itself, just briefly. In terms of the next steps, as we said, it is consultation. We must start consultation before the end of May this year, before the end of May. If we do not, as David indicated, we have to start the process afresh, utilising the new procedures under the 2019 Planning Act. So we do have a fair bit of work actually to put in place the arrangements for the consultation. The plan has been delayed because of the National Planning Framework, but the consultation is an extremely important step that will need to be undertaken, because for the first time we will be able to put on the table for our communities proposals for the future development of all of the communities within East Ayrshire. We will invite, therefore, representations and objections to the plan. So the next step after this, after the consultation period closes, is for the Council to respond to those objections. We will only respond, however, after the National Planning Framework has been approved by Scottish Government, Parliament itself. As you know, the consultation period for the National Planning Framework concludes today, and then on the back of that, officials of Scottish Government will prepare the National Planning Framework and lay it before Parliament itself. And so we will respond to the objections that we received to LDP2 as proposed on the back of the National Planning Framework. Once we approve the responses, all of the documentation, the background papers will be submitted to reporters for examination. The examination period will be between 6 to 12 months. It is an evidential-based examination. We need to support the content of the plan, and that's a very critical stage as well. After the examination period, we will receive from the reporters a report recommending various amendments to the proposed local plan, and essentially the Council will have an obligation to accept them under the existing procedures that we have. We will, of course, be preparing in the interim as well supplementary guidance, and I'll come back to that, particularly in relation to developer contributions. From this point onwards, therefore, once the plan is approved, the ability of the Council to make some amendments is more limited. But when we do respond to the objections and representations, we can obviously, on the back of those representations, amend the plan, but give that to reporters to consider. One key point to bear in mind is that the National Planning Framework, as we said, is planned to be approved by Scottish Parliament in the summer of this year. When it's approved, it will become part of the local development plan. So when the current local plan goes out of date, it will be replaced by the National Planning Framework. And that's vitally important to understand. So I'm going to now just briefly go through how we've got to where we are at the moment in relation to the plan itself. As David said, the starting point was the main issues report itself. It was an engagement tool. We went out to listen to what people within our communities had to say about the future development of their community and, of course, East Ayrshire as a whole. So we started there, we went out and engaged as much as we possibly could during, as I said, very challenging circumstances. We have appointed and concluded a whole series of consultancy studies to get independent advice on industrial land, for example, on the transport impacts of the proposals, on Kilmarnock and Stewarton in terms of development strategies, in terms of the habitats within East Ayrshire as well. So there's been a whole range of consultancy studies undertaken. We've worked closely with the key agency group, likewise, and we're one of the very few councils within Scotland that have been able to do this. Work along with SEPA, Architecture and Design Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland, Nature Scotland. They've been involved and working with us, which has been an excellent process, collaborative process, and so their contribution has been built into the plan itself. We've undertaken a huge amount of work in terms of assessing the proposals and the sites themselves. All the sites that you see within the plan have gone through a clear process. As I say, the examination will be evidential, and so we have evidence to support why we're allocating the sites within the plans. We've worked, as we say, across the board with all East Ayrshire Council services, in particular education, and we've just been hearing with regard to health and social care. We've been working with all of the services, and again, their input has been contained in the plan itself. And you'll see in the background evidence all of the reports and all of the work that has been carried out. And every site as well has been what is termed environmentally assessed in terms of its impact on the environment of East Ayrshire. Moving now to the content of the plan. In some respects, it's very similar to the current local plan. There will be 2 volumes. Volume 1 will provide a vision, a strategy, a spatial strategy for East Ayrshire, and it provides the policies. What is different is that obviously we've responded to the climate challenge that we have, and we've responded to the strategy that the Council has put in place to address climate change. As we've indicated, another key change is the Ayrshire Growth Deal. We've responded to that. And of course, we've also included community wealth building in the plan as well. Volume 2 is similar in the sense that all communities have been identified, and we've identified on a community-by-community basis the individual sites that we propose for development, future development within the East Ayrshire. So if I can now just go through the key areas of change. We mentioned the Ayrshire Growth Deal. The local plan identifies key sites in support of the implementation of the Ayrshire Growth Deal. So we've identified sites at Moorfield for the Ayrshire Engineering Park. We've identified sites at Kirkland Side and Kames Hill to the east of the Bellfield Interchange to support the AMEC development and further economic development. We've identified a site adjacent to the Barony campus for the core project. And of course, the Halo site as well, which is substantially developed, has also been identified. That's critical. We want to ensure that East Ayrshire responds positively. In terms of the economy of East Ayrshire has been impacted quite severely as a result of COVID. So this plan unashamedly responds to that, and unashamedly is wanting to support economic development within East Ayrshire, because in essence, if we can actually close the gap between Ayrshire and Scotland in terms of economic performance, that the benefits of that will be felt by all communities and all families within East Ayrshire. So that's one key area of change. The second one is Stewarton. We've had a lot of discussion in Members Officer Working Group at the main issue stage, and obviously as we've been preparing the plan as to how to address the challenges of Stewarton. I think we all recognise that Stewarton has grown in terms of population, and it's been difficult for the infrastructure, particularly educational, the other infrastructure in terms of road infrastructure, the health infrastructure to keep up. What we are proposing, therefore, is an ambitious interlinked set of actions to address some of the infrastructure challenges that we see within Stewarton itself. It will be phased. We want to see improvements to the school estate within Stewarton first. And we have identified a site for a new school that will release the existing site there for health care facilities and other affordable housing as well. As I say, it's a series of interlinked steps. And remember as well, of course, that the National Planning Framework will require us to identify sites for 4,050 houses within East Ayrshire. It will be part of the local plan. And we have responded, but we've limited the growth of Stewarton linked into the identification of the school site itself. We're very fortunate to be in a position where we, as officers, we've had good dialogue with landowners and their representatives in relation to the proposals, and it's been very positive and productive, that dialogue too. Moving now to the Bellfield Interchange. The Bellfield Interchange is clearly the most important travel and transport traffic interchange within East Ayrshire itself. There has been issues in terms of its capacity, and it's clear that there are capacity issues moving forward, that if we do wish to see the development that has been identified within the local development plan, we do need to see capacity increases to the capacity, I should say, of the Bellfield Interchange itself. It is a very attractive location for development. We have identified, as we said, land to the east at Kirkland Side and Cameshill for economic development purposes. But to realise that land, those proposals, we will need to improve the capacity of the interchange itself. The plan does identify how that can be done. It can be done initially through signalisation of the interchange. That will increase the capacity, but there are further steps within the work that we've undertaken through the transport appraisal and analysis of how we can further enhance the capacity of the interchange itself. There's some further work that still needs to be done with Transport Scotland in relation to this, but we are confident that signalisation will enable the proposals within that area. But I should also say, of course, is that signalisation will release the other sites within the Kilmarnock area for development as well. So a critical piece of infrastructure does need to be enhanced as a result of the planning work that we've done, needs to be enhanced if we wish to see economic development, but also community development within East Ayrshire and the communities close by to the interchange itself. Obviously, members will have questions in relation to that. We can provide more detail. I'll move on now to Kilmarnock Town Centre and South Central Kilmarnock. We've appointed consultants. They've been working with Celebrate Kilmarnock and other community organisations, business organisations, looking at placemaking within Kilmarnock Town Centre. We have now a strategy for placemaking within the town centre itself as part of the background papers. We've been working very closely with our consultants and with the community to put together the actual strategy itself. It's a launch pad for further action and further activity within the town centre. We've also been examining South Central Kilmarnock. It's a lot of vacant, underused and derelict land within South Central Kilmarnock, which is the area to the south of the current town centre. We've been looking at that area. Ideally, it should be developed for residential and other purposes, but it is subject to flooding. And we've been looking at how to manage that in a very ambitious way as well. So what we have contained within the plan itself is an aspirational strategy for South Central Kilmarnock. It will require more work, but the plan will contain what we would like to see, and further work will be required to actually see whether we can manage within a very challenging context flooding. We think we can do that. We've made some significant steps already. We've carried out what is termed the LIDAR study. We've looked at how we can store water upstream, combining that with further work within the actual town itself. But there's more work that needs to be done to look at the answers, shall we say, in terms of managing flooding. And we're recommending as part of the plan that that work obviously be carried out as a priority. I've mentioned that there are a whole series of sites. There's many new sites which have been identified throughout the plan itself across all communities. Every site has gone through a rigorous examination process. We have looked at the constraints to development, we've scored and we've filtered the sites themselves, and we've gone through a final assessment. So the sites that you see within the plan itself have gone through that process, and the evidence is in place to support their allocations as well. We've also identified Loudon. Loudon was one of the key points that were referred to in the main issues report. We have taken on board the lessons learned from the inquiry that we had a number of years ago with regard to Loudon. We still do see that there are opportunities for development within the estate itself, but we've taken, as I said, the lessons from that and enhanced the planning guidance with regard to Loudon Castle and protecting the garden and design landscape, as well as the architectural and archaeological features within the local area. One key part of the local plan is developer contributions. We will be, and we're in the process at the moment of preparing supplementary guidance for developer contributions. We have identified in the plan where we see a need to enhance existing educational and other facilities. But we will be seeking developer contributions for public realm improvements, for improvements to community facilities, but particularly education and healthcare facilities, as well as transport facilities. We've identified the catchment areas where we would wish to see improvements to infrastructure. As I say, we are working with colleagues at the moment to prepare a supplementary guidance document. We will want to when we go out to consultation with this plan, issue the supplementary guidance alongside the plan itself. That will provide, therefore, communities with more detail about what we propose in terms of developer contributions and how we can deliver enhancements to facilities. Developer contributions is challenging. It will require developers to obviously agree to them, and we felt it's worthwhile ensuring that we do some work and have that up front so that developers and others who are wishing to invest will understand what's in front of them and hopefully work with us to actually achieve some of the improvements that we need to see within our communities. Finally, I just wanted to mention that there's a huge amount of work gone into the environmental report, the strategic environmental assessment. It runs to hundreds of pages. It will be submitted, as I say, as part of the Council's contribution to the reporters. It underpins all of the allocations, and thanks in particular to the officers who've been involved in that. It's quite a soul-destroying job to go through so many different sites and to undertake the analysis in a systematic way. But a huge amount of work has been done in relation to that. In relation to the status of the plan, if it is approved today by Council, it will obviously achieve full status when it is adopted by East Ayrshire Council. It will have some status as an approved proposed plan, and it will have some status in terms of planning applications, particularly if there are no objections once we go through the consultation period. If there are no objections to some of the new sites, it will be obviously inform the decision-taking process for planning applications. As it moves through the process, as the steps that I outlined earlier, it will gain greater weight. So when, for example, the Council agrees its responses to the representations and objections received through the consultation exercise, and it agrees those responses, that becomes the sort of final position of the East Ayrshire Council. It will have greater weight. So when the plan is submitted to reporters, it will have greater weight, but obviously it will have full weight when it is adopted. When it is adopted, and this is also important with regard to timing, the National Planning Framework will be superseded by the East Ayrshire Plan. That will have greater status. And it's been deliberate on our parts to do that. Many councils will not be in that position, but we will be in a position once this plan is approved and adopted, it will take precedence over the National Planning Framework. However, until it is NPF4, once it's approved, will take precedence within East Ayrshire. So the risk at the present time is that if we do not approve this plan at the present time, we risk not meeting the transitional arrangements that have been put in place by the Scottish Government. It's been extremely challenging. We waited a year and a half. It's been delayed. The National Planning Framework has been delayed by a year and a half. We did not want to be in this position about, hitting deadlines in terms of that. However, we have to work with what we've been received. We received only the copy of the National Planning Framework last November, and as members who've been part of the Members' Officers Working Group will well know, we're taking that and changed the plan on the back of the NPF4. But that's the key risk that we have. That if we don't approve it now, there's a risk that we will have to start the process again. Clearly, we will be happy to take questions from members, but essentially, I'm going to leave it there. There's a huge amount of work. We will try our best to try and respond to questions that members have. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. And can I just say, very best of luck with your retirement. I first worked with Carol 20 years ago. Just seems like yesterday, I'm sure, Carol. But just wish you the very best of luck for your retirement, and we'll try not to be too sore on you at this last meeting that you're presenting at. Members, can I ask that everybody has their microphones on mute, because there's a lot of feedback coming through elsewhere. Okay. First of all, I've got Councillor Gordon Jenkins and Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to add to Jim's thanks for everybody who's worked on this. I know it's been a great amount of work's gone into it, and over 2 years in the making. And personally, I welcome almost all of it. But I do have a problem, and I do have a problem with the sections that deal with Stewarton. And just to give notice, Provost, as I spoke to you before the meeting, I am minded at the moment to propose an amendment when we come to that part of the proceedings. But I've not decided yet, because I want to hear what gets said in case I get my mind changed. So with that in view, I've actually got 4 questions for Carol, if that's okay. Will I go through them one at a time, or do you want them all at once?
Whichever you think flows best.
I think it'd go one at a time, because they may change depending on the answers I get.
I'll indulge you this time.
So, thank you very much. So the first question for Carol is in the page, is it page 415 dealing with Stewarton, it's 102 in the document, 415 in our papers. It talks about a Section 75 order. Could you just explain to us what the Section 75 order actually means, please? Thank you.
Okay. I think that we will provide answers. It's either going to be myself that will provide answers, a colleague Karen, or David. I'm going to hand over to David on this one.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And obviously, through you, Chair, quite happy for Stuart McCall to come in. But a Section 75 is a legal obligation that sets a requirement on the landowner. So there's obligations in there that the council and the landowner can sign up to. So that would put a proposal forward that if a land was being sold, it could be sold for a particular use and for any kind of phasing that was in that. Does that answer your question, Councillor Jenkins?
For the moment, yes. Thank you. So my next question then, if I go on to this idea that, and though it's not in the paper, we did discuss this when we had our meeting, that the land that it's being deemed there to be able to be developed would help us build a new primary school for Laneshaw there. But when I look at the footprint of Laneshaw Primary School, you could get about another 2 primary schools on the land that's sitting there belonging to us already. So why do we need this other piece of land in order to build a new Laneshaw Primary School? We could build it in the grounds we've already got. And I'm sure we could find a way, traffic management, to keep the lorries away from our primary children.
Yeah, but maybe.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks to you, Chair. We've had substantial discussions with education, over the last couple of years to discuss Stewarton and what the issues are there. And obviously there are a number of complex issues in respect of, for example, decants of school and being able to build a new school. And there isn't anywhere in Stewarton for children to be decanted to in order to allow a new build to take place on that site. The other thing is that obviously the capacity of the school is increasing, and particularly in terms of Laneshaw Primary School, as you'll probably be aware, it used to be a secondary school. And so in terms of the internal layout and the way that the school has been designed, it isn't, shall we say, optimal for the use that it's in at the moment. So we really are requiring a new school. The other thing to add to that is, of course, that the way that we deliver education is changing, and the uses, there's a lot of work at the moment, particularly in terms of Scottish Government, in terms of bringing sort of community uses together to create a kind of larger sort of campus where you'll have community uses aligned with education uses. So actually the requirement for a school is probably larger than the existing requirement in order that we can bring uses together and make the school somewhere that the community can use as well. The other thing to add is that we really are in dire need in Stewarton of some additional public open space, and the site to the west of Stewarton, which we're suggesting is included within the local development plan, will also allow us to provide much more public open space and provide obviously open space facilities for the primary school as well. So really, I suppose to sum up, we need a bigger site, and there isn't the provision on the existing site or any other land that the council own within Stewarton, which will be satisfactory for a new school. And I'm not sure if Aileen, whether that answers your question, or I believe we've got Aileen Hollywood as well, who may have some further comments that would be helpful.
Aileen.
Thank you, Provost. Actually, I missed the question because it just dropped out. I typed a message in there, but I assume it was around the primary school. Could you briefly just kind of remind me what the question was?
Sure. Councillor Jenkins was asking, he felt that there was enough land at the existing Laneshaw Primary to build a new school, or to build, I think to quote you directly, 2 new schools.
Well, I think there may be enough land to do that, yes. Yeah. Obviously, I've not taken a ruler to it, but... No. And it was, why were we not building the school within the current site that we have in our control? If you can give us, further update on, we've had an update from planning, but perhaps you can shed some more light on it in terms of the use of the building and its its purpose as originally built as a secondary school. It's not really great to be repurposed as it is for a primary school.
Yeah, I think I came in as well, just as Karen was mentioning about decant, because that would be a serious concern, if we were to build on that site. So there may be the possibility. I think the thing to remember as well is education is very much about outdoors as well. So what we would need to make sure would be that there was sufficient external still available to make sure that we can deliver the outdoor education. But I think the biggest issue, and I believe Karen maybe was in the middle of mentioning that when I rejoined, is that there just would not be anywhere to move the children to. We had a very, very brief discussion with parents a few years ago when we did talk about the possibility of building on that site, and the only available accommodation would be at Kirkstall Primary School, which, as we know, is being used for Cross House just now, and then St Sophia's are going to move in. So it would mean busing children both ECC and primary children to Kilmarnock, and we'd be talking about something like 5 years down the line. So it would be very, very challenging to do that. And I think the opportunity to have where there's the new housing site has been proposed, and also the opportunity to have a primary school there, you know, is still in the heart of the Laneshaw catchment area. So I hope that answers the question that, you know, is...
It does, I'm sure it does. Councillor Jenkins.
It's a answer, Provost, which I'm thankful for. I don't agree with it, but I'm thankful I've had an answer. Thank you. I'll come back to that if it's necessary later on. If I can have my third question now, and that's about the consultation, and it's spoken about in page 119. And it's about the local consultation. I suppose I want to ask you about it because yesterday morning at 7:30, I put up on Stuart's Voice and Stuart's Whinge, which are the two Facebook sites, information about what we're going to discuss this morning. I thought that was okay because the documents are on the council website, they're in the public domain, so there was no problem pointing them out to people where they were and what they said. So in the space of 24 hours, I checked when I left the house at 8 o'clock, I've had 200 replies. Over 200 replies, and only one of them was kind of neutral on it. The rest were all saying this is terrible, blah, 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 blaming officials who I should say right away I defended, because I don't think this is officials' fault. I think the officials have done a great job, but they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They're as much a victim of this as anybody else. But my point is this, I've been saying the same thing for the last 3 years. People have been saying the same thing in Shorten for the last 3 years. I've even had a member of the Fenwick Community Council who was at one of the working groups that you spoke about, telling me that he said the same thing at the working group. It sounds like consultation, but I don't know if anybody's actually, well, you might be listening, but nothing's happening because of it. I mean, I will stop in a minute, but let me give you an example. When I was in my profession, I used to have to speak to people. I used to have to consult with them, and I would explain to them what consultation means. Consultation means I say I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm consulting you on it, and you say to me, I think that's rubbish. It's a terrible thing to do. And I say, thank you very much. I've listened to your consultation. I'm now going to do X, Y, Z. Because consultation is not negotiation. And I think what's happened here is you've consulted, but I don't know who you're talking to, because they're not the same people who are talking to me, and they're certainly not saying the same things. So I'll give you a chance to come back at me on that one, and then I've got one more simple question.
Councillor Jenkins, I would only just say that in defence of our planning colleagues, they can have as many consultation events online or in person or however it would be. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and I think that's important. Whereas social media, without a doubt, will instant reaction. Whereas a consultation event, people can come and actually be informed for it. Now, I'm not speaking for planning; they will speak to us, but I'm sure and give you some update on that. Do you want to come back in? Do you want me to allow them to come back in that now, or do you want to finish?
If I was given the impression that I was criticising officers there, then I apologise. Okay. I'm making no criticism of officials here, and I do know I'm getting a bit irate, but I'm just like that when I get, adrenaline starts pumping. I apologise. But what I'm saying is that you've consulted, but the people I'm consulting, and it's not just the last 24 hours, that's just an example. It's been going on for years. We've been saying the same thing. So some comment, I'll allow you to come back and with some comment about the consultation. And then I've got one more quick question after that, Provost, and I'll let people get on with their other business.
Okay, we have had quite a lengthy questions, Councillor Jenkins, but I won't stymie debate. I will let you in. If planning want to come back on that basis, when Councillor Jenkins has had his fourth supplementary question, I'll then allow Councillor Reid, Councillor Claire Maitland and Councillor McGee, and then if anybody else wants it, Councillor Cook wants in, so we'll do it in that order. Okay, planning, whoever is going to respond.
Thank you, Provost. I think David wants to say something. Then Karen will say something with regard to consultation, and then I may say something at the end as well. So,
well, sorry, I was just let Cam come in and answer the question first, and then that'll go for that first.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I would say is that obviously, as you'll understand, over the last couple of years, public consultation has been extremely difficult because of the pandemic, and it's meant that we've had to do everything virtually. Obviously, there are a lot of people who live in Stewarton, kind of not far off 10,000. And what we chose to do was to take an approach whereby we invited lots of the different groups which are operating in Stewarton and which in and of themselves represent the community. So at the main issues report stage, obviously we had a full public consultation, and we got around about 300 responses from people in Stewarton to that consultation, which we took into account. Following that, we did a consultation exercise virtually with the Community Council and various other representatives from Stewarton organisations in tandem with our Vibrant Communities colleagues. In the process of preparing the development framework and working with the key agencies group, we also put together a number of events. I think there were 4, whereby we met with some of the key groups within Stewarton who represent the wider community. So examples of them would be Stewarton Initiatives, the Community Council, Stewarton Historical Society, the Woodlands Action Trust and Cyclanic, to name a few. We also met with representatives from Dunlop, obviously because Dunlop does rely on Stewarton for its services. And we worked with those groups, and as well as people, some of the doctors from the medical practice and the head teacher at the high school to discuss Stewarton and the issues and the constraints. And we started off those discussions talking about what was wrong and what we'd found out. So we all know that there are infrastructure constraints. What we didn't know when we started this plan was the kind of depth and breadth and the exactness of them, and we've done as much work as we can on that. And then we started to talk about various different issues and how we could solve them. You'll see in your background papers on the portal there is a draft development framework which has been prepared by our consultants Ryden and Austin Smith Lord, and there are sections in that on the consultation that we've undertaken, and as part of that document there will be an action plan which is currently being prepared, which takes on a lot of the projects that the community want to see happening in terms of, for example, active travel and new cycle paths and making connections so that, for example, it's easier for children to walk up to the high school or near Robertland. What we do have, obviously, is a major issue here in terms of infrastructure and how to solve it. And that's not an easy thing to do. And obviously, in trying to find solutions for that, it's clear that we're not able to please everyone. But I think what we've tried very hard to do is to release the absolute minimum amount of development, but which simultaneously will allow us to address some of these infrastructure constraints. Without doing anything, if we do nothing, if we don't release land and try and solve some of these constraints, then the issues in Stewarton aren't going to get better. In fact, I think they're probably going to get worse. So we have tried very hard to reach a position which, has the minimum amount of development, but that development is only there in order to help us release some of these infrastructure constraints. And as Carl's discussed, there's a kind of knock-on effect here of if we get the site for a school, then we're able to provide better medical facilities and affordable housing. So we're starting to really be able to address the constraints and the concerns that people have in Stewarton. And the reality of this is that the point is that we make life better for Stewarton, that we're trying to work towards a 20-minute neighbourhood where, the town is successful and is able to cope with the demands that it has, because it's a popular place to live, and it's a great place to live in East Ayrshire. So I'll hand over to whoever's next. Thanks.
Yeah, if I can just maybe support what Karen said there. It is very challenging to be able to address infrastructure constraints within communities. It's not an easy thing to achieve. And I support everything that Karen has said and the reasoning behind why we've done what we have done. What I would also say as well is that come April, the current local development plan will become out of date. Experience in Scotland has indicated that developers monitor very closely when plans become out of date, because there are certain advantages moving forward, taking development forward within the context where a plan is out of date. We've indicated in the terms of the introductory comments as well the wider context within which this plan sits, and which the community of Stewarton also sits, which the community has to be aware of, is that the National Planning Framework, which will be approved sometime this year, summer to the autumn of this year, will identify how many sites need to be identified within East Ayrshire to meet housing land requirements. The figure for East Ayrshire is 4,050. So we need to identify sufficient land with sufficient flexibility within the current plan to meet the requirement of 4,050 houses. We have restricted in this plan the number of new sites within Stewarton. It's one new site, subject to, as David indicated, a Section 75 agreement to release part of the site for a school and other facilities, community needed, the facilities that the community really needs. And it is a series of interlinked steps. So if we can do that, clearly we can build the school separately from the existing school, and it gets open, and the existing school therefore would close, and it could be demolished, and the site therefore used for other facilities such as health, which is badly needed within the community health facilities within the local area. So it's a series of interlinked steps. What I would say is that if we draw down the shutters, basically as many in the community, and I can perfectly well understand why they would want to do that, say no further development, how do we as a council improve the infrastructure within the local community with the assets that we have, the limited options that we have available? We strongly recommend this approach because we're working with local representatives of the local landowner here, and they're working very closely with us. It will enable us to meet one of the main requirements for additional facilities, education facilities. It limits future growth as well, and future growth which can be accommodated with those new facilities in place as well. If we do not do that, if we do not identify that, given the popularity of Stewarton, given its proximity to the Glasgow conurbation, the fact that it's got good bus and rail links, it remains a popular place for development. There's no doubt in my mind that developers will be and are looking at East Ayrshire, Stewarton within East Ayrshire at the present time, and will come forward with planning proposals for housing development. What they will do is, and they will point to the National Planning Framework, that will become part of local plan.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we're kind of veering out with the question really that Councillor Jenkins asked. All valid points you're making, but I think the specific point was relative to consultation. Now I note that Councillor Jenkins has a fourth question. There are another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Councillor Mackay, 5 members.
My question, the consultation, Provost, has been answered. Thank you. It was answered, well, I wasn't quite timing it, but it was answered 5 minutes ago. And I hear what you're saying. I've taken up a lot of time, and I thank you for indulgence. But my questions have taken up a lot less time than the answers have. One last question, thank you, and it's simple yes or no answer. Can the settlement boundary be changed during the life of the local development plan too? So if this whatever goes through and the settlement boundary is what it is, can it then be changed? Simply yes or no would be fine.
Carol?
No.
I think that's a very definitive answer.
Thank you, that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, we'll move on. I would remind members this is not Stewarton's LDP, it is East Ayrshire's LDP, but I do accept that there's significant issues in Stewarton, and I don't deny any local member who quite rightly represent the views of their constituents and others, and that's absolutely fine. Councillor Reid.
Thanks. Thanks, Provost. Can I maybe thank the officers and the chair and Councillor Roberts, Councillor Maitland, everybody else in the working group that were involved go through these laborious questions, and sometimes they have to be in detail because we are dealing with complex issues here. But it's important that we get this right. I think it's absolutely. I think Jim Roberts said just before he left, he pointed to recommendation 3, and I think that is absolutely fundamentally to note the risk and policy implications of non-approval or delay in approval of the proposed plan, and what that can do to the process. And to spell it out, for example, my own interest locally is the flooding issue in Kilmarnock and what that's doing to the economy of Kilmarnock town centre. And it's something we've been trying to address. And I'd like to thank Carol in particular, who's come some way to help address this problem. He's worked with others as to really grapple the problem. It's been kind of bouncing about for several years. But I think with this plan that we've got here, actually deals with it and highlights where we need to go. I don't think it could be any clearer in page 163 in terms of addressing the flooding. And it's quite a stark message, but it needs to be. How the second line down, how the Council responds to the challenge of flood risk will therefore have a significant bearing on the pace and scale of regeneration and will impact on the growth in of the affected areas, which are principally around about the Kilmarnock water, right through Kilmarnock town centre. In paragraph 67, it points to the national policy and it indicates that the effect is of a moratorium, which is effectively the case with the new policy, actually stymies any development in the economically important parts of Kilmarnock, which is our largest town and the largest economic area of the town round about Kilmarnock town centre. And it's really going to affect jobs, it's going to affect income, it's going to affect the state of the town centre. So many things that we need to deal with in the economic heart of East Ayrshire that we cannot, it's been really good work and a lot of people have had their contributions. And, as we say, go back to paragraph 12, that, couldn't be any more starker. Should Council choose not to approve the plan, there is a risk that the work of the last 3 years will be substantially abortive and a new plan will have to be created. We can't afford to go back 3 years. We've had a great process, and even going back to Stuarton, I would rather take 300 informed decisions through the consultation process, the 200 posts or 200 likes on Facebook any day of the week. And I know that social media is important these days, and we've got to listen to people. We are listening to people the best we can, and we can only, I think, the circumstances that we had the consultation, as I think Karen pointed out there, was very difficult given the COVID period where it wasn't, we didn't have public hall meetings that we would normally have. So we've got to take that into account. And I mean, the bottom line is in terms of Alnwick, yes, absolutely. We need another school for Stuart. We need health facilities. We need public open space. But we can only do this with an approved local development plan and other things that we need for the area, including improvements in infrastructure and transportation, new roads, we can only argue the case with government when we've got a plan in front of us, or they'll do it for us, and that's the last thing we want to do, because I think East Ayrshire, we know our best what we're doing here in this council, rather than have that imposed upon us. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. I echo a lot of your comments. As you know, in the previous role, if members would indulge me, I have challenged the council leader to be forthright with SEPA, and I know you have been, and it's good to see that actually we now have plans in place that will really deal with this, because we cannot have South Central and Central Kilmarnock as a development no man's land. It cannot happen. We will not let it happen, I'm sure, members. And you're right, in terms of the consultation process, in terms of what we have done throughout the last couple of years, I know myself and Councillor Fiona Campbell have been involved with planning and discussing particular for issues for Crooked Home. So we've taken that opportunity that we could take that today and have left it, but we've made sure we've made our voices very clear, and planning have taken that on board, and I welcome that. So with that in mind, members, I'll move on to Councillor Maitland, then Councillor John McGee, Councillor Tom Cook and Councillor Maureen Mackay, and then we'll see where we're at. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Provost. I'm deviating slightly. I did just have a few words of thanks to say, but after that, I'll try and incorporate some of it in. So, as a member of the local development plan for the last 3 years, we have certainly pushed the boundaries of there is no such thing as a stupid question. And I thank the officers for their indulgence. It's been a privilege, a huge learning process, and one of the hardest, most rigorous, intricate, interesting and rewarding projects I've ever been involved with, not just as a councillor, but in my whole life. I feel I should be getting some sort of certificate, at least a sticker after this. I would like to thank Jim Roberts for his chairmanship, for all my colleagues and officers within the LDP. There's been a massive scale of engagement with key agencies, community members, all council services and outside consultants, especially in support of Stuart and the Bellfield Interchange, developers' contributions and the growth deal. My colleagues, I ask that you approve, note, authorise all the recommendations on page 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maitland. Councillor John McGee.
Thanks, Provost. I'll try and be brief, but I might not be able to be. Just I think we've had an officer working group on this for more than 2 years, and I think we've had adequate amounts of meetings to come and raise our issues. And I don't object to what Gordon's saying here today, because he's been a councillor for Stuart or Annex, sorry, for the past 5 years. But I don't recall a councillor in that ward ever not having concerns with the growth in Stuart. And I can go back to just after 2007 with Councillor John Mackay, Roseanne Cunningham, and we were talking about the crossing Stuart, and we changed the sequence of the traffic lights. Now, I've never agreed with that as the solution to the Stuart and Cross, but that was the solution we come up with, and it did alleviate a wee bit, but the growth in Stuart has continued. Now, I think what Gordon is saying in the Stuart voice is that, and I'm quoting him here, and if I'm wrong, he can correct me, having served in the Planning Committee for the last 5 years, I can assure you that if the proposed changes in the settlement boundary goes through, then there is no guarantee that the infrastructure, school, medical centre, etc. will be built. There is no money in this year's budget for it, and I doubt there will be in next year's. What I will guarantee is that the developers will be in there like a shot. Now, they're Gordon's words. Now, obviously, if you write something like that on social media, you will get 200 likes, because if we give them another 24 hours, we get 2,000 or 5,000 likes. But if we go back to paragraph 61, 62 and 63, what the planning officers are saying about the plan for Stuart, then both things can't be right. What Gordon's saying in social media cannot be right compared to what the officers are saying in a council paper that we're debating in public today. So my question, I think, really to the officers is, when we reach this plan and we've got some control over a plan, because if we don't have some control, as Councillor Reid said, the leader of the council said earlier, the Scottish Government will do it for us through a reporter. So our plan will allow us to build the school and the necessary green space that Stuart so badly needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if officers want to come back on that. Just to clarify the point that Councillor John McGee has made relative to the comments versus what Councillor Jenkins has made, if that's okay. Just a quick confirmation.
Agreed, Chair. Councillor McGee's kind of summary of the report is right.
Okay, fine. Thank you. That's all we need to hear. Councillor Cook.
No, thanks, Provost. I'll try not to be too long, but I'd just like to thank the working group for all the work they have done. I mean, they've really put heart and soul into this over the last 2 or 3 years, and also to thank all the officers involved as well. I think we've had, as members, I feel we've had ample opportunity to have input into the paper in front of us today. Concerns have all been addressed,
I was particularly pleased that a number of issues that I raised, I got answers back very quickly in writing to confirm what the situation was, and these responses were really welcome. What I'm really pleased to see, though, is that the Ayrshire growth deal is kind of front and centre in this, along with the Bellfield Interchange and restrictions around that. And I think the work we need to carry on with Transport Scotland is really important, because both the growth deal and the Bellfield Interchange are critical to the economic development of this East Ayrshire Council, and also the people of East Ayrshire, both in creating them wealth and also jobs for them, which go hand in hand. So happy with that. I was going to mention the flooding issue, but I think Councillor Reid has covered that perfectly well, and I won't take up any more time to say, other than to say I really fully support the paper that's in front of us today. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thank you. And I would like to echo all the comments that have been made. An absolutely enormous piece of work, and thank you to officers. Carl, I have no idea how you're being allowed to escape today. I have no idea how we will replace decades of your experience, and we see that within the local plan that's before us as a paper today. I do hope and sure you will have exchanged all of your experience. I see Karen there in the background. And Karen, I hope that you understand the enormity of the mantle that you have to take up here. And again, well done, everybody. And members, thank you for doing this work. And Councillor Maitland, I think you have summed it up exceedingly well in terms of there will have been many questions that will have been asked, and I'm sure it will have been with extreme patience and detailed explanation that you'll have received answers. So we have this plan in front of us. I welcome, certainly, the fact that we have developer contributions in relation to schools and health facilities. Of course, I am really interested to see actually what the levels of those actually will be, because that will be vital, particularly when we consider the changes in funding models that we are having presented to us. I do have a real pleasure and want to particularly comment on a very local issue in relation to Kilmarnock North, and that is actually looking at what is definitely a blot site for us at the moment, and that is we have some proposals to look at how we are actually going to investigate and see if it's possible to go forward with a park, cycle and electric vehicle charging facility on the site of the old hotel. That will be very welcome, and that will be very welcome particularly in terms of what was the cram parking that was overspilling into the wider residential area. So that is very positive. Again, like Councillor Jenkins, I find it very difficult to accept that the area that I have represented since 2007 has to have yet another, I think it is another new further 800 plus houses within that area. I understand completely that that's a balance against the requisite 4,050 houses. I know it is representative of it's a popular area to stay. It's popular in terms of how we actually get on to motorway from Kilmarnock North. But again, I think what we have to look at is taking account of the policy of 20-minute neighbourhood, how we actually ensure that we have services, how that we actually ensure that we have facilities. And again, folks, as you know, that's very much down to master planning when we are actually at that stage. So those are the concerns that I have, particularly the additional sites in relation to Western Road, and I would welcome some comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Over to planning.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. You'll note that obviously you've spoken about the Alton Hill site, which is for 800 houses, and there's obviously also the Fardale Hill site, which is proposed for a similar number. And we have recognised in the plan very much the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods and how we try to attain that in East Ayrshire and across our settlements. As such, in terms of both those sites, Alton Hill and Fardale Hill, we have stated in the plan under Prop 10 that the developers may be required to provide educational, community and retail facilities within their sites so as to be compliant with the requirements of a 20-minute neighbourhood, so that when, if and when we get applications in for those sites, we're able to use the plan to ensure that those areas have the facilities they need so that people can are within walking distance to their everyday needs. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Karen, I would love to tell you that it did. Unfortunately, it doesn't. I'll tell you why, and that's because the area that we have in Alton Hill at the moment, again, people were promised from our planning process, people were promised shops, people were promised retail facilities. The whole time that I have represented that area, which is now 15 years, I still don't have one shop, and we had to have a great deal of trouble taken to actually have a post box developed. So again, what I need is confidence that in this proposal, we have something that is going to actually not leave us 15 years before we have a shop, 10 years before we have a post box within a 20-minute neighbourhood.
I think Councillor Mackay, I acknowledge the point you're making and appreciate historically that there's obviously areas designated for land that hasn't been, brought into use for the type of facilities you're relating to. What we have promoted in the actual, actual policy in Prop 10 is that we have the ability to put in an illegal agreement through a Section 75, which could then preempt that there's a phasing to this, so that you get your facilities in place before you get your housing, or they run in parallel. Not to have it, in there would then be in a position where you could have developers choosing to put in housing rather than facilities, and we don't want that. So that's why the policy is set out the way it has been. Hopefully that answers your question, Chair.
And thank you, David, just giving you the opportunity to express that, and so is that is actually heard and on record. That's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Any other questions or comments from members? Councillor Todd.
Thanks, Provost. This affects our ward, myself, Councillor Knapp, Councillor Maitland, and it was through the LDP discussion. We had a big discussion about transport situation, especially up at Brickhouse Hill Road. There's only really one arterial route up to that new proposed development, and that's Treeswood Head Road. There are another couple of ones we've got to ground the hooses, forgive that term. And it always struck me that it seems to be that we're allowing housing developments to be put in place, and then we're going to look at the master plan for transport. I would have thought it would have been better to have the master plan for transport in place, and then you could have the satellite of houses round about where your master plan of the roads are. Could you give me a timescale for when the master plan that we've been discussing about for transport? Because with the advent of the infinity loop that's going to really affect the Ward 5, we don't know how that is going to interact with the master plan for transport. In this proposed LDP that I'm not against, there's a whole host of potential for housing all around Ward 5. And I'm really concerned, as are others, with the impact on transportation, and including the old Kirtland Side Road. We really need to get some clarification around how the transport to this proposed development of up thousands of houses for the future, how it's going to be managed. When's the master plan coming in? What's the consultation period, please? And well done, Carol. Thanks very much for all the help that you've given me through the years, explaining things that I wasn't au fait with. And I wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Planning, who wants to come back in?
Thank you, Provost. And thank you for the comments as well, the good wishes from the members. A couple of things I wanted to say. First of all is that to support the current local development plan, we have carried out a transport appraisal, very extensive transport appraisal. We've modelled the main road network within East Ayrshire, and there's been additional modelling work done at key interchanges and locations and nodes as well. Within the transport appraisal, once we've modelled, we've created a new model based on 2021, and the impact of all of the proposals within the local development plan has been assessed utilising the models that have been created. Along on the back of the impacts, the transport assessment does actually indicate what mitigation is required to enable the developments to go ahead. In addition to that, I'll go back to the comments made in relation to the allocations, the procedure that we went through. At every single site that we have identified, we went through a whole series of consultations. And one of the key ones, of course, was transport with ARA itself. So every site that we have identified, there is a detailed comment received from ARA in relation to them from our colleagues in ARA. That background work is there and will be called upon as we take the sites forward. So the wider strategic context is contained within the transport appraisal. There's been a lot of modelling work, a substantial piece of, a very extensive piece of work. And I want detailed comments as to how certain locations, what mitigation is required in certain locations. And then, of course, we've got the more detailed site-by-site comments as well, which can be brought in likewise. In terms of some of the major allocations that we identified in terms of master planning, that will be taken, that work will be started once we submit for the examination itself. It's not necessary for the detailed work is not necessary for the actual local development plan, but as we want to obviously ensure quick implementation, that type of work will be carried out when the plan is submitted for when we have a bit more time actually for examination, and then we'll be working on the master plans. We do have for some of the key locations draft master plans, and we've worked that out and used that as part of the transport assessment, but that detailed work will be carried out once the plan goes to examination. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that yeah? Thank you very much. Okay, I've got Councillor John McFadden, then Councillor Reid, and then I'm going to close the debate if that's okay, members.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank all the councillors that were involved in the local development plan, the officers, and everyone that's worked on it. In my understanding at the last meeting I was at, was that, when asking questions, I was categorically assured we would have a foolproof legal plan in place to make sure that before any housing ground was released, that we would definitely have the new school site in our possession for Stewarton, and we'd be carrying on with the potential improved health centre and other facilities on the Laneshaw site. So really, on the back of what Councillor Jenkins was saying, I'm just asking for reassurance here that we absolutely have a total foolproof legal way forward to make sure that the people of Stewarton get what they expect out of this local plan and the infrastructure improvements go ahead, and they can only house building can only take place after all that is at least organised or on its way. I mean, I think it's fair just to ask that question in this forum, if that's all right.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I've indicated, we've, as officers, have had a very productive discussions in Sturton in particular with regard to the landowners there and their representatives. It's been very productive, very cooperative. They've been working with us. I'm sure if that spirit continues, there will be no issue with regard to ensuring that we do have a site for our school. Clearly, the council will still have to apply for funding for that site, for the school itself, and that is a separate process. But we're very experienced as a council and colleagues in so doing. So if we can continue with the arrangements that are in place at the moment, I am confident that we will be able to put together a satisfactory, more than satisfactory Section 75, which will meet the council's needs as well as the landowners' needs. I think they live in the area, they understand the local situation, they want to work with us to achieve that. And I think with that cooperation and with that attitude of mind, we will be able to do this.
Thank you very much for those reassurances, and enjoy your retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thanks. Just a couple of quick points, just to totally agree with what Councillor Todd's saying there. I think the plan in general, we've seen the pressures, I think Councillor Mackay, others mentioned, to the north and to the west. In my own ward, we've seen that, that growth for the last 20 years go that way. It's good to see that we're now looking at the Bellfield Interchange and a development to south and east. But I've got to say that one thing that I think we need to keep an eye on and keep advocating. I know I had a discussion in the working group about this, but the transport links we've got on and off southbound from Bellfield, from Kilmarnock South, Bellfield, Rickert and Shortleys, down the way towards there, but we don't have it northbound. And I think, that link northbound, not only would it ease the pressure in the Bellfield Interchange, but would allow some of the people in Bellfield, Rickert and Shortleys to gain the economic benefit that the rest of the town and the surrounding area has had. So I think that's very much an important link to us. I think we've got to keep advocating that. And just finally, just to mention, just Stuart again, I think Carol and others have made the point well, and I know that Gordon and all the local members, John and Ellen and John, have all advocated. I mean, it's not new to us. We know that Stuart really does need more ground for schools to help the whole area grow, and other infrastructure, health facilities. That's not lost on us. But I think this plan opens the door to that rather than closes it. And I think that's something that a future council must be an absolute priority for them to pursue. And I'm sure the local members there and elsewhere will make sure that happens.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. For the Colombo moment now, Carol, you're on the hot spot. How many local plans and LDPs have you been involved with? Because you've been here a long time.
Well, two minerals plans, 1, 2, 3, 4, half a dozen local development plans, but eight or 9 plans, I think, in addition to structure plans as well. So quite a few, yeah.
Just a few. Well, your legacy will continue after your retirement. And again, please accept our good wishes on behalf of all of the elected members. You'll be a hard act to follow. Members, we have a recommendation. However, I want to know, and I'm asking, Councillor Jenkins.
I'm sorry, Provost, but I haven't heard anything that's changed my mind. So I would like to, at the appropriate point, move an amendment to the recommendations. And I'd also like to, before I do so, make the amendment, but before we vote on it, I'd like to explain why.
Okay, we are at the point where we are going to take the recommendation, which is the 8 recommendations. Gordon, do you mind if you put your microphone off just for a second, please? Thank you. The 8 recommendations, pages 111 and over into 112. Do we have a proposer and seconder for those? Councillor Maitland? And seconded Councillor Cook. Councillor Jenkins, you have an amendment to that?
Yes, thank you. I'd like amendment to the very first recommendation. It's to amend the proposed plan, which is on pages 102, 103 and 104, dealing with Stewarton, to say on page 102, there will be no increase in the settlement boundary at this time, and to amend the map on page 103 accordingly. That's my amendment, and I would like to, appropriate point time, you tell me when, I'd like to see why I'm making that amendment.
I tell you, I think maybe we need to just clarify the wording, I think, and Stuart might keep us right here. In terms of amending settlement boundaries, do you want to delete a site from the local plan, and in doing so, does that include, is that the residential site and the proposed site for the school that you are looking to remove from the LDP? I think just to try and be a bit more specific about it.
Thank you, Provost. I've never done this before, and I'm more than happy to take your advice, okay?
No.
Now, my understanding
Gordon,
is that it's the same thing.
Just a second. The reason I'm raising that is we have to be very, very careful here and be very specific, rather than just say we don't want a particular line of plan. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you proposing that the proposed, if I'm right from what you've said, the proposed residential development site that is indicated, I can't remember the reference number, in Stewarton, and the associated site proposed for a school be removed from the local development plan? Is that what you're saying, or?
It is, Provost, apart from the fact I think the school is not actually mentioned, and a school isn't actually mentioned, I don't think, in the development requirements paragraph. And I think the site is the same site. It's the same site between the development and the school.
Stuart?
I think the best way forward would be to make by reference to the plan, if there's deletion, a proposed deletion of any of the sites, by the references that are on the plan, Provost. I think that's the most sensible way and understandable way to do it. Could you maybe refer to the plan on page, well, it's 103 and 416, Councillor Jenkins, the plans you're asking to be deleted?
Right. We delete the part that, and I'm sorry, it's very small. I actually had to get a magnifying glass out to see the sites, because at first I thought it was the behind Crusader Crescent, and it's not. It's the other side of the road. So it's STH2 in brackets underneath Prop 11. Is that right?
Yep.
So it's that site there.
So you would want ST-F1 brackets H. What's your view on that?
That's talking about a future proposal. I don't mind that as a future proposal because it's not in this LDP2. In fact, I wouldn't actually mind if the one that I'm talking about became hatched as a future proposal, and that would give time for the infrastructure to happen.
I suppose slightly wearing my planning hat, whilst I'll be mindful of the fact I'm here as Provost and to chair this meeting, is that if you were then, and I get that it's a future site, but you would be deleting a site, a gap out with the settlement boundary with another site being left. So, I mean, up to you how you want to put that motion, but I'm just mindful of the fact that we need to be careful what we're doing.
Okay, then that, Provost, I don't want to cause that confusion or what might be deemed as a gap site. So I suppose I'm going to have to add the ST-F1 in brackets H as well to delete both then. That's the simplest way.
Okay. So, sorry, Chief Executive is going to come in.
I just wanted to give for clarity because Councillor Jenkins had indicated that within that SDH2 there was no mention of the primary school. On page 415, if you look at the narrative, there is clear mention of the primary school within that SDH2.
Where is that? Yes, I'm with it, but there's two bits.
It's in line 8.
It's page 415.
All right, okay, yep, I see it now. I see it now. Thank you very much for that. I was wrong. There is mention of it. I think my major point was that it's the same site as the houses. They're not two separate sites. But thank you for that correction. And it is covered by your suggestion that I do it on the plan. Yeah, because they're both there.
Okay. So you've put forward an amendment. We can either go to the vote or we do need a second, of course. Do you have a seconder, which is a fair point? Yeah.
Well, we can ask if I've got a seconder, but I would like to explain why, because I think it's important. I asked questions, but I didn't give any argument as to why I'm asking for the amendment. So I would like a chance to do that, if possible, Provost.
Well, we'll ask if you've got a seconder first, and then we can discuss it, if that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Do you have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Ellen Friel has seconded that. Do you want a few minutes to adjourn, to come back, to perhaps allow you to discuss that further? I think that would be helpful, members, or do you want to just go to the vote and allow Councillor McGee?
Hi, Provost. Thanks very much. I would just like some legal clarification. Where would that, if that motion was to go through, where would that leave us? Waiver plan for Stewarton. Would that leave us as a council with no control and with the national planning framework through the Scottish Government or reporter deciding what happens in the future of Stewarton, and we've got nothing that we could do about it?
It's a fair point. Stuart.
I think, Provost, prior to any legal input in relation to that, Carol might want to come in relation to our ability to our impact in any ability to meet future housing needs.
I think Councillor McGee is quite correct in saying what he is saying. We will have made no provision for a school. Clearly, as the Chief Executive has pointed out, page 415, it makes it very clear that we were looking for a master plan to be prepared, for a school to be provided, and for that to be related to future development in terms of residential. So it's very clear what the plan is actually indicating, which is school first. School first as part of a master plan approach to future development. We don't have this site within it. We have no provision for a school, and correspondingly, in terms of the interlinked proposals on the table, no provisions for health and welfare facilities either, with the potential, therefore, too, of making the situation worse. But as Councillor McGee indicated, once the National Planning Framework is approved, it will become part of the local development plan, and it's an open door, basically, for developers to come in and put planning applications in front of the council using National Planning Framework as a justification. This proposal here counters that and it ensures that we have a planned approach to future infrastructure development within Stewarton, meeting local needs and requirements. And that's basically what I really wanted to say. So thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Carol. So, do you want in or okay?
And just briefly, I mean, we're absolutely putting at risk the new school and the health facilities here. We're putting us in a situation where we could be just tying our hands to the developers and the views of the reporter with the Scottish Government, and we could end up with nothing, but we could end up with houses all the same, with no reassurances in terms of the tying up any deal in terms of a new school or new health facilities. I think members are willing to think about what you're proposing here.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Okay, members, we have a motion that has been put forward by Councillor Maitland and seconded by Councillor Cook, and that's for the recommendations. And we have an amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Gordon-Jenkins and seconded by Councillor Friel. Councillor Jenkins, you wanted to speak to your motions, to your amendment, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to do so.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, two things. I hear what everybody's telling me about the timescales here. All I can say is that I've been saying the same thing for the last 3 years, and this is the first chance I've had a chance to get a democratic vote on it. So I make no apologies that it's coming in at the last minute. That's not my fault. It's not anybody's fault, it's just the way things, but are people actually suggesting we shouldn't have a democratic vote because of things here at the last minute? I don't think so. So I'm knocking that one out straight away. The other point I want to make is Councillor McGee quoted me perfectly well. Perfectly. Thank you, John. I'm glad you brought it up. I noticed in the answer, the word guarantee wasn't used. I had said that there is no guarantee the medical practice or the school will be built. John says that the officials had said something different. The two couldn't be right. But the answer we did get that from the officials was that there isn't any guarantee that it will be built. There is no guarantee. I also noticed that in the in answer to Councillor McFadden's question, the word that was used was that they were confident it would happen. Again, no guarantee, and the reason why it can't be guaranteed is if you go to a Section 75 order, the developer can appeal it or ask for a moderation by the council. If the council doesn't give that moderation, they can go to the Scottish Government, who could find in their favour. So you can't give a guarantee that the school or the medical practice or anything will actually build. There is no guarantee. There is no guarantee, by the way, and I'll say it before somebody else points out, there's no guarantee with my proposal that it will be built either, or we could prevent the housing. There is no guarantee. It could be overturned, as people have said as well. There's no guarantee here, folks. There is only a decision to try and do what we think's right for Stewarton. So here's my reasons why I'm saying it. I've already said why there's no guarantee on the buildings. As far as the medical practice is concerned, you know, we have just had Daffin Mount built, or in the process of being built in Stewarton. Because of that, the medical practice, who have had a number of people on their books for years, who are out with their, I don't know the correct word is catchment area or something, got a letter from the practice telling them they could no longer be their doctors. They'd have to find somewhere else because they were having to make space in their books for the new people at Daffin Mount. So if you put 350 people back into Stewarton, 350 families back into Stewarton here, does that mean the medical practice are going to kick more people out of their books? Because the buildings will go up before, as already been pointed out, there's no money for the medical practice or for the school. So are more people going to be kicked off the medical practices books to allow these people coming in? You know, we say we've consulted with Scottish Water, but frankly, Scottish Water were told before David Dale that their plumbing wouldn't actually cope with the flooding there. They were told that by the engineers, because I was at the meeting, the engineers who were doing the development. Nothing happened. The people on David Dale got flooded out twice, and they've had to put in a pipe to take it away. Barber's Court keeps flooding out, and again, Scottish Water, Barber's Court keeps flooding out. And we've had discussions in there for years, but nothing's actually happened. So, and I'm saying this to make the point, there are other ramifications about making this decision here, and that are going to actually follow through. We have a chance here to actually, as a council, saying we're no allowing, we're no standing for this. If the reporter in Edinburgh decides to overturn that and said, that's fine. I know what I would prefer. I would prefer that we stood up for people, and the bad mannered woman in Edinburgh makes the decision, than we make a decision now. And can I remind everybody, I don't need to, that I'm not standing again, but there's elections coming up in five weeks, and people will remember. Thank you, Provost, and thank you for your indulgence. And I'm sorry, I should have said right at the start, by saying these things, I want to reiterate, I am not against more building in Stewarton. We've got a thriving high street because of the new building. I'm just saying the infrastructure has to catch up first. And if I have given the impression that I blame officials for any of this, I apologise unreservedly. I think officials are in a terrible position here. They're caught between the planning law and me, if you like, but they're caught. And they've done. I do believe that they have done the best with what they've got. Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll shut up and let democracy happen.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. You wanted a point of order, or?
Aye, Sorry, Chair, I thought Gordon was doing his valedictory speech there, and I ken he's passionate about this. I just wanted to come back in slightly. When Gordon says there's nothing happened about Barbers Park, that's simply untrue. Because I've held meetings myself with Scottish Water and officers for this council. And Scottish Water have a plan in place that there's going to be something done about the area around about Barbers Park. Now, I can't remember the officers just off the top of my head, but I can assure there are officers in this council that can verify that there is a plan in place, because I've been working about Barbers Park for longer than I care to remember. But utilities are no like the council, or they're exactly like the council. Sometimes they want to do something tomorrow, but it's got to be part of a plan, and it takes maybe 2 or 3 years. So I just want to point out that far from the fact that nothing's been done about Barbers Park, there is an ongoing plan round about Barbers Park by this council and Scottish Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. We could stray into the wider issues here. I get people are very passionate, and rightly so. That's why we're here, to be passionate about our communities. Can we now move forward to the vote, please? We'll do that by roll call, if that's okay. We would do that anyway because we have members who are not present with us in the chamber. Will we start the process, Lynn? So, just to be clear, the motion is put forward. That's the recommendations, pages 111 and 112 by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Cook. And we have an amendment to that which would exclude the identified sites in Stewarton from the LDP, proposed LDP2, and that has been proposed by Councillor Jenkins and seconded by Councillor Friel.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just to clarify, the motion is proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Cook, to approve the recommendations as detailed in the report, and the amendment by Councillor Jenkins and seconded by Councillor Friel is to approve the recommendations as detailed in the report with an amendment to recommendation 1 in terms of no increase to the settlement boundary at this point in time, and the deletion of the 2 sites identified as ST-H2 and ST-F1H, and that the map be amended accordingly. In terms of the vote, members, when your name is called, could you confirm if it's for the motion or for the amendment? Provost Barry Douglas.
Motion.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
Amendment.
Councillor Gordon Jenkins.
Amendment.
Councillor John McFadden.
Motion.
Councillor John McGee.
Motion.
Councillor Helen Coffey.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Grant.
Amendment.
Councillor Maureen Mackay. Councillor Mackay. Councillor Tom Cook.
Motion.
Councillor Lillian Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Linton.
For the motion.
Councillor Douglas Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Fiona Campbell.
For the motion.
Councillor John Campbell. Councillor John Herd.
For the motion.
Councillor John Knapp.
Motion.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
For the motion.
Councillor Jim Todd.
Motion.
Deputy Provost Sally Cogley.
The motion.
Councillor George Mayer.
Motion.
Councillor Claire Leach.
For the motion.
Councillor Neil McGee.
Motion.
Councillor Alison Simmons.
Motion.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
On the motion.
Councillor Jackie Todd.
Motion, please.
Councillor Walter Young.
Motion.
Councillor John Bell.
Motion.
Councillor Elaine Dinwoody.
Motion.
And Councillor Drew Filson.
Lynn, I'm present now.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. In terms of the
The vote, are you for the motion or for the amendment?
I am for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Provost, I can confirm that the motion has been carried by 26 votes to 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, before we move on to item 7, I suggest we have a 5-minute comfort break and we come back about 25 past, about 7 minutes actually. Members, if we can get seated and we'll make some progress, please. Give me just a second. I think nearly everybody is back. We'll make progress. I think there's a couple. Oh, here we go. Councillor Maitland. That's all right. Members, we will move on to item 7, which is the open cast coal mining in East Ayrshire completion of restoration and recovery activity report. And David McDowell will take us through that. So David's up again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to use a bit of technology in this presentation. So just first of all, the purpose of the report is to update Council on the position with respect to the conclusion of the restoration works at East Ayrshire Council's former open cast coal complexes, activity which began in 2013 following the closure and subsequent liquidation of the two main operators in the local industry. The report will set out in summary form a site-by-site analysis of progress and the current position. To provide you with an overview of the restoration undertaken over the last 2 years, we've prepared the drone footage on the Defat, Poharnell, Galefton and Greefilling Chalmerston complexes, and I'm glad to see Councillor Roberts is here because he's always asking for us to make sure we've got drone footage. So this will detail the works carried out over the pandemic period in accordance with COVID regulations, and it'll also just highlight the Glenbuck Heritage Village that we completed just before COVID. Over the years, I've presented a number of drone videos to Planning Committee on a site-by-site basis, and this footage today is the second comprehensive video to supplement our 2019 video. Appendix 1 provides a visual register demonstrating the extent of restoration across all sites. Since 2013, members will have visited these sites both physically and virtually as they have been restored when considering the quarterly compliance monitoring reports. Also attached to your papers is a slide presentation of each of the sites, basically a before and after. If we had time, we would have went through that, but through you, Chair, members can look at that in their own time. So following the demise of Scottish Coal and Aardvark TMC Limited in 2013, through this liquidation event, it impacted 9 out of 10 open cast coal complexes in East Ayrshire. The closure of these sites was to have profound and lasting implications, resulting in significant job losses. At the time, there was about 350 people directly employed in these companies. And it also had adverse impacts in the local supply chain with the environmental abandonment of sites, along with the abandonment of owners' statutory licences relating to their obligations under the planning and health and safety legislation. Other local authorities within the coalfield had to deal with similar effects, but none as large as East Ayrshire Council, whose coal production was the largest in Scotland, with the last coal production completed in July 2020 at House of Water. This liquidation event required a multidisciplinary team utilising legal, planning, surveying, health and safety, mining and geotechnical engineering specialists, and which included engagement with legal counsel, the engagement of specialist mining companies, and to review on-site impacts, to review also the failure of the fact that the appropriate levels of restoration bonds weren't put in place. So members who were there at the time will remember the Opencast mining recovery plan, Steps to Recovery, was approved by Council at its meeting on 19 September 2013. And that confirmed the full extent and disturbed and undisturbed land across the 9 former Scottish Coal and Aardvark complexes, as well as quantifying the notional cost of restoration of works to the approved restoration plans. The report comprised 38 recommendations across a wide range of activities, including economic development, environmental, planning, financial, legal, health and safety and risk management. The framework underpinning Steps to Recovery established 3 principles for site master planning, namely, make safe, make good, make new. As members will recall, the Council commissioned an independent review of all processes and procedures around the management, determination, implementation, monitoring and review of the planning processes in relation to open cast coal operations within East Ayrshire. This independent review, which took place between July and November 2013, was led by
Mr Jim McKinnon, the Scottish Government's former Chief Planner. This report was considered by Council at this meeting on the 28th of January 2014. The McKinnon report found a number of weaknesses at the core of which were individual management and communication failures, particularly in terms of the development monitoring of restoration guarantee bonds and the failure to put in place effective compliance monitoring practices. It contained a further 14 recommendations which would become the focus of the Council's recovery efforts. Responding to these recommendations, the Council put in place a strengthened compliance monitoring framework for surface mine developments, as well as application consents for all other major environmental projects. So since 2013, the detailed reports advising of a range of compliance monitoring activity were presented on a quarterly and annual basis to Planning Committee, a practice which remains in place today and provides both transparency and scrutiny over all environmental projects being developed within East Ayrshire. Whether it now is a wind farm or whether it's a quarry, these are all seek that scrutiny. In terms of financial guarantees, it was also agreed that these would be managed corporately to ensure that the independent mining engineers and environmental consultants' advice was taken forward in the decision-making process from a financial, legal and planning perspective before a restoration bond is agreed. The immediate aftermath of the closures required the Council to prioritise activity and focus on two key areas, namely the open cast operations which addressed the employment of the local workforce and ensuring compliant operations and calling the bonds in which would help the restoration of both operational and non-operational sites. Due to the enormity of the task, many of the challenges being faced would not be achieved in the short term, with the longer term strategies required to be developed, particularly in respect of site master planning and environmental restoration. To develop site master plans within the restoration budgets, the Council worked with Scottish Government's Coal Task Force, landowners and other regulatory bodies, and also the community liaison groups to establish solutions on a site-by-site basis. An outcome of the Coal Task Recovery Plan for the Scottish Government was to create the Scottish Mines Restoration Trust and also the subsidiary Mines Restoration Limited, the operational body who were there to deliver restoration on sites. The Steps to Recovery programme focused its efforts on design and implementation of an extensive restoration programme to repair and reprofile each of the former open cast coal sites to a naturalised landscape. As members will see from the drone footage from Poharnell and Dilfad through to Garleth and Grief Hill, the sites have benefited from the restoration works which have enhanced by the new landowners taking on their own aftercare and development work towards, in the majority of cases, forestry plantation. The commencement of the restoration works at Chamerson and Pennyvenie that were undertaken during COVID marked a significant moment for the Council as the last of the major Council-supported restoration projects to be implemented. The Scottish Mines Restoration Trust have indicated that, subject to due process, the charity have completed all the works relevant to their restoration remit across the whole of Scotland and will look to cease trading during this year when all legal and environmental obligations are concluded. Provost, I mentioned at the start of the presentation that members had a copy of the slides before and after pictures. The key principles to make safe, make good, make new, focus on measures to ensure public safety had been undertaken across all sites and environmentally acceptable condition met. This would contribute to the regeneration and enhancement of East Ayrshire's landscape and environment. All restoration works have been subject to independent safety and geotechnical audits. While safety measures differ on a site-by-site basis, typical steps to include the redesign of water bodies, regrading of sudden drops in landform and the provision of fencing and signage, along with measures to enhance natural environment sites include the replacement of soils and backfilled areas to restored areas, the large-scale importation of peat and compost, the long-term management of water voids and the plantation of trees and safety measures around the water bodies. Access arrangements were considered in line with the right to roam legislation across each of the sites to minimise risk to safety and maximising existing road infrastructure. Looking ahead, the long-term aims are to encourage the development of alternative uses of these sites to include for tourism activities, forestry, biodiversity, nature conservation and agriculture, all to the benefit of local communities. Paragraph 17 to 66 sets out the summary of the sites with the presentation which you have access to, providing the before and after pictures. Just though in summary, just to highlight, For Dunson Hill, for instance, the £3 million restoration project at Dunson Hill took place between July 2015 and December 2017, and through the restoration services agreement and what we term positive enforcement with the landowners, we were able to restore the site. The design of the restoration works evolved during the delivery phase, and this was a key area which was working in partnership with the contractor. We're able to look at where the additional soil and soil making materials on site and use that appropriately. So there was other areas where we looked at the importation of peat within the site as well, and that was basically taking peat from the interconnector works that were being carried out in the south and making them, rather than taking them to the landfill at Irvine, they were deposited through a SEPA licence to the site, and that's been carried out throughout other sites. The most notable change was the recontouring and reduction of the central water body to create a lock-in with the other shallow marshlands areas created. In line with the community request, additional pathways, road upgrading and viewpoints have all been installed. In terms of Netherton, with £3.96 million restoration works that were carried out in Netherton, and that was undertaken between August 2015 and November 2019, and that was carried out in line with the planning consents in conjunction with the coal recovery that was ongoing at the time, the northern and southern excavations. Soil has been replaced over the backfilled and restored areas now, and the grass is now sown and bedding in. This vegetation has now become well established. The two water bodies have been fenced appropriately to discourage access, and trees and gorse have been planted in the inclined slopes. Both access points have been retained with a central access track installed, providing pedestrian access connectivity between the communities, with a forest plantation being developed by the landowner. In terms of Pennesk, the £3 million restoration works at Pennesk took place between July 2016 and September 2018 through, again, positive enforcement notices with the landowner. The restoration works, again, looked at naturalising the topography, and that was a site particularly we were able to import a lot of what we call PAS 100. That was compost that was coming from North and South Lanarkshire, material that wouldn't have been used in those specific areas. So the site is also traversed by a number of walking routes, and as a result of restoration, the core path network from South Lanarkshire is now able to link with the River Air walk at Glenbuck. In terms of Poharnell, this was one of the largest mitigation measures that we had to look at, because Poharnell has part of the special protection area within it. So what we had to do was look at how we reprofiled the ground, and at the same time made sure we could bring the habitat back. We're supported with grant funding from the Scottish Government on this basis, which is noted in the report. The land management mitigation obligations which are now in place will relate to the long-term aftercare, which is detailed in the Poharnell mitigation plan, and that will remain in place until 2029 for landowners to undertake works in those areas. In relation to Scares, members will recall Scares with a large void right next to the village. We undertook a restoration project of £5.5 million on the abandoned site, and that was carried out in conjunction with the contractor at Netherton, Hargreaves, and that was to maximise staff, equipment and materials. As a result of all the restoration work, the abandoned void has been infilled, and both the Ward Burn and Dunder access track have been reinstated. That area has now been, we've passed that area over to Forestry Land Commission through sale for them to take forward community woodland following the completion of the works. In terms of Spire Slack, the £1 million restoration works at Spire Slack was undertaken, and if members who have been up there will see that that's the East Ayrshire's Grand Canyon. It is an actual asset which we will be able to utilise. It's not in this drone footage, but it's been highlighted previously, and it's actually an area where it brings forward all the education establishments that deal with academia for geotechnical information, because you're seeing 300 million years of the ground conditions by going to the face of the excavation. The land has been subsequently sold by MRL to Forest Land Scotland to have developed a master plan to progress a forestry plantation on site. And members will be aware that we've undertaken further aftercare works on the Glenbock Village site, and that's brought forward the actual heritage village, which we now own as a council, and we manage and maintain. And you'll see that at the end of the drone footage. In terms of Dilfad, this was one of our biggest challenges, because what effectively Scottish Coal did, they dug a very large hole, took the coal out, put a bank wall up as a dam, and then filled it full of peat. That peat ended up with significant problem areas to manage. But what we did, we worked with Mines Restoration Limited and our own engineers to take forward a plan that, as you can see in the video footage, actually provides a reasonable solution. And I think one of the things I would draw to your attention when you're looking at some of the early plans that are drone footage is the fact that we have a lot of the ground conditions are actually the same colour as what you have in the natural environment. So we've done quite well to get the areas to blend in. In terms of the Dilfad site, that will be moving over to sale very shortly, and we're just waiting for an update on who the owners are. The last couple of sites, Garlaffin and Grieve Hill, we had a £5 million contract on site. Similar proposals. We looked at the voids that were already there. We looked to make them safe by putting 1 and 3 gradients in place. We recontoured the land. We provided all the safety measures with ground drainage in place, and we now have a site which has achieved its restoration proposals, and now will move over. That was a site where, with Scares and Grieve Hill, we had 2 areas of land which were abandoned under the law, so we had to look at, as an environmental authority and the Environmental Protection Act, is stepping in, and we did that, and we've now got a solution on that site, and we'll be looking for the Dumfries Estates, who will be assuming responsibility for the land to take over the aftercare for that particular area. Chalmerson and Penavini was on the drone footage. What you will see is that it doesn't look as if it's finished, and it's not. Chalmerson Penavini is split into 3 areas. The area that looks over towards Dalmellington has obviously been restored from the original British coal, and then moved up, and there was works carried out over the last couple of years. So those have been signed off. But the key area, which is the Forestry Land Scotland land, that area has had restoration works carried out under health and safety, and those works are completed, and those were in the drone footage. But the key works that we've done is we've negotiated through a legal agreement, and with the new North Kyle wind farm, we have a phase 2 works which will deliver a £6.3 million restoration budget, working alongside Brockwell. So 2.6 million will be donated by them, and what we will then take on is using the other restoration bond money to deliver a restoration after the wind farm is completed. And I say that because we get many questions about, well, why are we helping a wind farm company? And it's quite the opposite. The wind farm company, once now they've got consent, will complete their works and infrastructure, and then any works that they do that can help with the restoration, they will do, but we will then use the 6.3 million to do the remaining restoration works. Duncan Newmer, the works at Duncan Newmer, this was a site that came before the planning committee, and we approved scenario B planning permission. That was a halfway house, and then the market fell out of the coal, so we didn't have the next scenario 3, which would have helped to finish that site. But we are working with the owners to develop forestry on that land, and that there is sufficient ground material on site to finish that restoration. But that one will lie with Hargreaves as landowner. I touched on House of Water. House of Water was, as I say, the main production site at the end for coaling in Scotland, and indeed was surpassing some of the coaling in the rest of the UK. That was concluded during lockdown, and we now have went through a proposal where that restoration has now brought that area back in line, and it now features as part of the Brockwell Energy Wind Farm for North Kyle. It would be wrong of me not to highlight Keir Mining, who have been working with us all the way through the liquidation event. They've been working away developing their 3 sites within the overall Greenburn complex. They have now completed all their works. They have a 10-year aftercare plan in place. And from that, members will be aware that the road, the U720 between Dollegals and Cumnock Road has been open since last November. So, Provost, paragraphs 67 and 68 set out the financial positions as previously reported to Council, Cabinet and Planning Committees. And then I would just highlight for those members who were looking for a day out, whether it's walking or cycling in the countryside, enjoying the local environment, linking with the existing routes of the River Airwalk, it's a really great place to go and to see the nature. And the sites have naturalised and are blending into the local environment. So I would endorse that experience for you to take over the summer period. And I think the last thing to highlight before going to recommendations is that through all this work that we've been working in partnership with a number of agencies, including Mines Restoration Limited, we have been trying to ensure that we've been employing local people, and that's been quite successful, both in the local people that have been employed with Mines Restoration Limited, Hargreaves as well when they were working, Banks when they did the restoration work for us, and that has been helpful in the supply chain, where a lot of the plant hire was all from local businesses. So with that, Provost, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. A really comprehensive report, and I think members will share my view that it's good to see so much of the restoration done. I think the drone images really help, and I think we've come a very long way. I've got Councillor Neil McGee, Councillor Jim Roberts, then Councillor Dougie Reid, and then Councillor Drew Filson. So we'll go on that basis. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Provost. Just I've been a member of a number of liaison groups up here and seen it in the stages, and it was quite frightening when we went there at first. It was an horrendous sight wherever you went, and I would just like to applaud the team, David and his team, and he's right, they have been very inclusive with the communities, but the restoration and the recontouring of the land is phenomenal, and I think it's probably in most cases is better than it was before the abolition of sense. But well done, David and your team. Thanks.
Thank you. Who was next? Councillor.
Thanks very much, Provost. I would pretty much like to echo Neil's thoughts there. I think where we came from in 2013, we were faced with an unprecedented situation. And, the complexity of trying to draw back from where we were in 2013, it's been pretty remarkable in a lot of ways. A lot of challenges we faced, in terms of a lot of people losing their jobs, big impacts on the communities, but one of the most important ones was the environmental damage that we faced and in trying to pull back from that. A lot of people might have stated that we were maybe lacking somewhat in bringing in somebody like Jim McKinnon to do a critique in terms of where it all went wrong. I think it was a pretty brave decision at that point in time, because I don't think McKinnon missed and hit the wall. But from that point in time, the recommendations that came from his report in part, that allowed us to put in place the steps to recovery. Now, when you look at the steps to recovery, where we were then to where we are now, I think this report, it's a particularly good report in as much it accurately reflects the journey that we have embarked on to this particular juncture. But the health and safety implications of what we faced, the peat traps, the voids, where there was risk to human life if people were not careful, these implications were massive for us, and working with other agencies as well was so important. Otherwise, we could not have achieved, what we actually did. So, a quick word about the coal team. Big well done. Legal services in terms of the bonds, extremely complex. You're here, Stuart. So legal services, well done, and also our own health and safety team, David Oren, so important. But it was good to see the drone footage, Provost, because a picture tells 1,000 words. And the drone footage was most important, I think, for today's meeting. Last point, in terms of Glenbuck, I think the Glenbuck project, bearing in mind there's a lot of people made a lot of representations that Glenbuck should not be forgotten, bearing in mind it was a big community in its own right. And if you look at the number of famous footballers it produced, and also the man, the legend, Shankly. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid and then Councillor Paulson.
Thanks very much, Provost. There's not really much to follow that, just to say, you know, what could have really been this council's undoing, and, you know, it was really a rock to council. You know, it's been turned into something positive, and I think that needs some kind of national recognition. Particularly, you know, when you see the drone footage there, as Jim says. I mean, you can see the bit at Chamerson where I had to stop the Jeep to be car sick during one of the many visits there. But it is, in terms of restoration of the environment, it's really something of a national scale. But I think that's something we should be absolutely proud of.
Thank you. Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Provost. Just the same as everybody else, just to thank David and his team for overseeing all this good restoration work about the open casts. Chamerson and Pennyvini, lots to do yet, but a lot of good health and safety work been done so far. Really happy to hear that you've done a deal with Brockwell for the 2.6 million. That'll make a big difference for really good restoration. But could I give you clarification on page 460 and the recommendations at number 5, just the various sites for fixed time periods. What would the fixed time periods be for the aftercare works, David?
For the owners, is this? It depends if the works were carried out with, for instance, Greenburn, for instance, that's a 10-year. That SEPA asked for a 10-year fixed period for that. And obviously that's replicated for like South of Water. Where the aftercare was under the enforcement notice, obviously we were carrying out budgetary work with the landowners. So landowners have taken on their own proposals for aftercare, but we have no control over that, other than the site at Poharno. I mean, the reality is that the sites are taken forward. The vast majority went to Forestry Land Scotland. They have if you haven't seen it, they've got a master plan for the various sites that they've taken charge of, and they're doing that. So, for instance, using the example, say Pennesk, for instance, Councillor Roberts and McGee will remember some of the complaints we've received about sewage sludge, you know, and soil amelioration. That's been used up there to, you know, to help the fertilise the ground and to put it into a condition for tree planting. So that's the type of work that's going on. So hopefully that answers your query.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Councillor Landon Waddy, is this your final contribution?
But I'm certainly not walking up Dunstan Hill. I've been up at Yins, that's enough. Thanks, just to pass on the thanks to David and the team. I was heavily involved with the liaison for the Dunstan Hill, and the team, your team had quite a challenge with the locals there, and to be fair, what a big difference. And I think the drone is a great way of seeing it when we all remember the photographs and what they were like before. Big difference, but I'm not going up Dunstan Hill again.
Chair, it's been resurfaced so you can drive up it now.
That's a challenge for retirement, Elaine. Any other comments or questions from members? I don't see anybody online either asking. Members, we will then move to the recommendations. They're at paragraph 2 of page 460 of your report. Are these agreed? Agreed? Okay. Thank you very much. Members, item 8 on the agenda is the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group. It's a definition of Islamophobia. And Ian Tuff, who is joining us virtually, is going to take us through the report.
Thanks, Provost. Good afternoon, members. So the short report, which has also been considered by the Council's Sounding Board, recommends the adoption of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group definition of Islamophobia. The definition is set out at paragraph 4 and has also been endorsed by all political parties in the Scottish Parliament through the Scottish Parliament's cross-party group on tackling Islamophobia. The Council has long-standing commitments to tackling discrimination, advancing equality of opportunity and promoting good relations in our workforce and across our communities through our equality mainstreaming reports and the equality outcomes. The adoption of the definition of Islamophobia is consistent with this and further strengthens those equality commitments. Provost, members' recommendations are presented at paragraph 2 for your consideration, and along with Alia, who's also on the call today, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. That's the kind of report I like. Short and sweet, but very, very important, and absolutely there is no place for Islamophobia in this country. And pleased to see that all parties in the Scottish Parliament have signed up to it. Shame that hasn't happened at Westminster, but I'm sure that will follow in due course. Councillor Leach.
That's great, thanks Provost, took the words right out my mouth. So as Ian and the report states, the report is asking Council to adopt the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group definition in Islamophobia. Tackling Islamophobia, the cross-party group, as Ian has stated, as the Scottish Government has launched a public inquiry into Islamophobia in Scotland. Now, to flesh this out a wee bit, let's talk about some statistics here in Scotland. So, the responses for this inquiry, 83% of Muslims in Scotland responded to say that they've experienced, 83% of Muslim respondents said that they experienced Islamophobia directly, and women are more likely to encounter it than men. The inquiry also found that 75% of Muslims experience Islamophobia as a regular or everyday issue, and 78% believe that it's getting worse. Just under a third say they've experienced it at work, 18% at school and 13% at college or university. That's horrifying. You know, in a country we like to think is forward-thinking, progressive, you know, it's something we do need to tackle. There's a lot of good work going on at the Scottish Government, as we know, to address this, and I'm sure we all look forward to seeing the work continuing through the Scottish Government, also with the development of a new hate crime strategy coming later in the year. I recently saw a BBC social video, you know, the wee clips that you see online, and it's Tasneem's story. It's worth a watch. It's in Scotland. It's in Scotland, but it's a really hard-hitting example of the issues that people are facing. It's important that we do officially define the meaning of Islamophobia, and I'm glad to see so many, including the Muslim Council of Britain, is involved in the definition, and I'm really chuffed equally also as Barry to see it come to this council, so thank you.
Thank you, some very well made points. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Provost. I suppose in a way I'm disappointed that we actually need to have a definition for Islamophobia. I mean, I think we'd all have hoped that by now we would all recognise that everyone's got the right to live their lives without any type of discrimination through religion, race, ethnicity, colour, gender and disability, without any need for a definition. You know, but I suppose it's proved that we do need that definition, so I'm quite happy to support it and endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think it is a stain in our society. You're quite right that it is required, but it is still required, and it's incumbent on everybody in this room, whether you're officers, members of the public or members, to make sure that we don't tolerate and don't allow these things to perpetrate. We think it's something in the past, but it really isn't. It's still happening absolutely here today. And as Councillor Leach, rightly points out, we hear disproportionately is affecting women more than men. So there's a double-edged sword to this. Members, the recommendations are at I think I've got somebody coming in. No, I don't. Sorry. Recommendations are at paragraph 2 on page 474. Are these agreed? Agreed. Okay. Thank you. Members, we'll now move on to the final part of today's proceedings. You'll all be glad to know. And it's the valedictory speeches. The Chief Executive will be followed by Councillor McGee, Councillor Cook, Councillor Reid, and then myself. We'll try